Good afternoon, friends. We welcome everyone to the International Conference Against Nuclear War and the Destruction of People. I want to live. Our first block of the conference focused on the current situation in the world, which is plagued by ongoing conflicts and wars that lead to hunger and poverty. In Gaza, the population has been subjected to genocide for several years. This has even been acknowledged by the United Nations. The methods of Tzahal are simply inhumane. We remember how they prevented humanitarian aid from reaching children. There are already reports that Israel is selling the skin of Palestinians, and there are numerous videos on the internet where representatives of the Tzahal say that they do not consider Palestinians to be human beings. The United States is doing whatever it wants, and no one in government is even trying to stop it. The Venezuelan president was kidnapped and the United States was not punished for it. In Iran, a girls' school was bombed for no reason in the early days of the war, and the United States was not punished for it. Trump has openly declared his interest in Cuba, Greenland, and almost in the entire Western Hemisphere. In Russia and Ukraine, the war has been going on for almost as long as World War II, without any results, although Russian officials have claimed that the war would be over in a few weeks. And the only result so far in the immense suffering of civilians, the numerous casualties on both sides, the destruction of cities and infrastructure in Ukraine, and the suffering of civilians in Russia from regular drone and missile attacks and widespread internet restrictions. Sanctions and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz are leading to the starvation of tens of millions of people. And the most importantly, there is a threat of nuclear war. The presidents of the leading countries are increasingly exchanging these threats. Mohammed Safa, a representative of the United Nations, stated that the use of nuclear weapons is being seriously discussed at the United Nations, after which he was forced to resign and is now being persecuted by the German authorities for speaking the truth. The consequences of sanctions and state policies are leading to even more serious crises, famine and poverty. More and more independent experts and ordinary people are realizing that this is not a coincidence, but a deliberate effort. There are forces in the world that are pursuing an anti-human policy, and they are using the same methods to establish total control, reduce the population, and persecute human rights activists in all countries. This is what we will discuss at our conference today. We would like to introduce our first speaker from Bulgaria, Plamen Paskov, a public and political figure.
Добрый вечер, дорогие друзья. Ко мне обратились организаторы из общества объединения общественно активных людей из разных стран мира.
Good evening, dear friends. Union of Free People, a society of active people from around the world, have contacted me to speak on their event. The subject sounds really general, but I'd like to share my thoughts and opinions on the matter. First, I'll show you the resource. What's happening? Here are the subjects they are interested in. War. Nuclear war. They believe the doomsday clock has now stopped 90 seconds to nuclear war. Climate disasters, epidemics, the declaration of the people of Russia. They have a leader. People are against the introduction of digital money. Petition against nuclear war. In fact, this is a really good idea, a really important problem. Another question is how successful it will be. An international conference against nuclear war. As you can see, there's already a video. Who are we? All National Union for Revival of Russia, OSVR. The people are already gathering. They have elected Ladurus as their leader. The website states, our leader is Svetlana Ladurus. There is a leader who is being hidden by the authorities. Here is a brief biography of Ladurus. Scientist, PhD in psychology, author of a unique method of psychological development, member of the Union of Writers of Russia, She wrote over 40 books on practical psychology and modern civilization process. There is a manifesto quite insightful, and contact information via Telegram in Russian, English, and French. What do I think? We are now living not on the eve of the Third World War, but in the Fourth World War. The Third World War was the Cold War, involving more than 52 countries. Tens of millions of people were killed in this war. The result, the outcome of the Third World War, was the collapse of the socialist bloc on planet Earth through internal betrayal in Moscow, in the Kremlin, which without defeat on the military, economic or ideological front, I repeat, without defeat, they decided to surrender and become bourgeois. Betrayed, and I'm not sure they sold out everyone. It turns out that the world already has one great dominator, capitalism. This great dominator, capitalism, resides in certain points, which people confuse with jurisdiction of countries. Jurisdiction do, of course, extend there, but that's a second or even third order convention. Capitalism is social Darwinism to the point of complete cannibalism, literally. So capitalism doesn't need such a population on Earth. It doesn't need an educated, spiritual population on Earth. It doesn't need a conscious population on Earth. People are needed only to the extent that they can be useful to the super people who own the printing presses, and the owners, the masters of money, and the concept of money, which now governs the global processes. People are very religious, only their religion is infernal. This must be kept in mind and understood. Furthermore, if we are talking about freedom, about opposing nuclear war, if we are advocating for peace, against these fake pandemics, against climate changes, climate change isn't due to human activities but to entirely different causes which I won't discuss here. So if we oppose all these consequences without seeing, identifying, discussing, or addressing the root cause, then we are doomed to a long battle with no hope of victory. If you only focus on addressing the consequences while fighting, you'll never achieve real results. The world is now entering the so-called sixth technological paradigm, marked by the advent of biotechnology, nanotechnology, computer technology, automation, and robotics in all spheres. As a result, the human factor is being greatly, dramatically, and many times reduced. As a result of this technological development, a huge portion of the Earth's population, tens of percent of the world's population, is suddenly becoming surplus. No one is going to coddle the surplus population, engage it, respect it, consider it, or treat it humanely. And the population becomes surplus because the sixth technological paradigm doesn't imply the kind of industrial production we are familiar with. Factories producing complex technical devices consisting of a huge number of parts have already been put into operation. For example, a car has over 5,000 parts. Specialized vehicles contain about 25,000 parts in a single product. There are factories with 70% of car production carried out with zero human intervention, only robots. Naturally, the question arises, if production is being developed this way and our rights are being deteriorated dramatically, who is our enemy? If our enemy is the bourgeois capitalists, the capitalists produce everything to sell, for profit, to make more money. We have considered that an unshakable truth. Yet, in fact, this only works up to a certain point. Just as was said for the laws of dialectical materialism, quantitative changes develop into qualitative ones. And with qualitative changes, the situation itself changes. If before, during the first, second, third, fourth, and even fifth technological orders, production was needed to satisfy ever-growing human needs and for the profit of those who control capital, now the situation looks very different. Previously, capitalists produced for profit, but when this profit reaches a certain scale, it changes the goals and objectives of those who accumulate this money. If you have thousands, you solve your own everyday problems. If you have millions, you solve your everyday problems at the highest level. If you have billions, you influence regional politics. You influence people's decisions. What will happen and how? You deal with issues of power because you've already resolved the everyday issues of profit. You no longer deal with everyday matters, how luxurious and expensive your car, house, or swimming pool is. If you have tens of billions, you influence large countries. If you have hundreds of billions, you can influence a metropolitan area. If you have trillions, you decide global issues. That is, if previously capitalists needed money to make money, then gradually it has changed. As in Maslow's pyramid, once you've resolved the issue of profit, the desire for power inevitably emerges, power over the others. And the amount of power increases with the amount of money. But when you have the ability to decide what money is on planet Earth, not just have money but decide, you have a monetary system, you have a printing press, you have the supreme power to decide which money is toxic, which money is sub-money, which money will never be money. Then, the question of profit and the motive for industrial production for profit disappears, because you decide for yourself what will happen, because you have a printing press. And this press doesn't necessarily print paper money. This machine can print electronic records, numbers on green computer screens, to create global money. Since they have such possibilities and excess population, the excess population must be disposed of. This is precisely what they are thinking about. And not just thinking, they have already launched and are implementing many solutions. While we are dealing with issues of climate change, World War III, nuclear war already exists, and World War IV is already underway and will end in the second half of the 2030s. These threats are the result of decisions by those who have the right to define the meaning and significance of world and determine what kind of money is money. That is, we need a decision not at the regional level but at the global level, about what kind of world we want to live in, what should be the vision of the future that the Soviet Union once set. But they managed to take the fortress called the World Socialist System, where there were fair, humane, and socially responsible principles. Remnants of these principles exist in Belarus, Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, China, and some other countries. That is, this system is quite viable and important, and could be the antidote to resolve these ills. But that's a question for another report, one that would be much longer. More likely it's a subject for a series of seminars for discussion, so that we can begin to understand the world around us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you to our first speaker, and invite researcher, scholar, Pan-African civilization system analyst, strategic policy architect from Uganda, Emmanuel Mihinga Kaija, to speak on global civilian protection and escalation risks in contemporary conflict.
Global civilian protection and escalation risks in contemporary conflict. My name is Emmanuel Mihingo Kaija. Distinguished participants, colleagues, and fellow contributors to this important dialogue, I address you today from a clear analytical position that the crises we are witnessing across the world cannot be adequately understood through traditional, state-centric notions of security alone. The concept of human security, advanced by the United Nations Development Programme in 1994, compels us to shift our focus from the protection of borders to the protection of people. anchored on the principles of freedom from fear and freedom from want. Yet the empirical reality before us reveals a profound contradiction. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, more than 114 million people are forcibly displaced worldwide. At the same time, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates that over 300 million individuals require humanitarian assistance. These are not isolated crises. They are indicators of a global system under structural strain. Distinguished colleagues, modern warfare has undergone a fundamental transformation in the early 20th century. Civilians accounted for approximately 10 to 15% of war casualties. Today, that figure has risen dramatically to 80 to 90%. Civilians are no longer incidental victims of war, they are just primary targets and casualties. We see this clearly in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where tens of thousands of civilians have been killed and critical infrastructure systematically destroyed. In the Gaza Strip, recent escalations have displaced over 80% of the population, effectively erasing the distinction between civilian space and battlefield. In Sudan conflict, it has forced more than 8 million people from their homes within a single year. Equally alarming is the systemic targeting of survival systems. The World Health Organization reports that over half of attacks on healthcare facilities occur in conflict settings. When hospitals become targets, war ceases to be a temporary disruption and becomes a sustained condition of human insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, conflict today is not only fought with weapons, it is increasingly prosecuted through economic instruments, sanctions, trade disruptions, and financial restrictions. While these are not often framed as non-violent tools, their consequences are deeply human. In 2022, global wheat prices increased by 30 to 40%, contributing to widespread food insecurity. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 735 million people faced chronic hunger in 2023. Energy prices also surged, rising by over 50% in some regions, triggering inflation that affected households far beyond conflict zones. Critical global choke points, such as the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of global oil supply passes, the Black Sea grain corridor, demonstrate how localized disruptions can generate global consequences. The implication is very clear for us. Economic measures are not neutral. They are integral components of modern conflict with far-reaching civilian impacts. Distinguished participants, perhaps the most serious risk we face today is the re-emergence of nuclear danger. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute estimates that there are approximately 12,500 nuclear warheads globally, or even more than that, I would like to believe, with over 9,500 in military stockpiles and more than 2,000 on high operational alert. Scientific modeling shows that even a limited nuclear exchange of about 100, Hiroshima-sized weapons could result in tens of millions of immediate death and reduce global agricultural output by 20 to 40% due to climatic effects, often referred to as nuclear winter. This would place billions at risk of food insecurity. At the same time, stabilizing frameworks such as the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and New START are weakening. The question before us is not whether nuclear war is acceptable. To be frank, the question is universally rejected, but whether current geopolitical dynamics are increasing its probability. Colleagues, these realities expose a deeper issue, a crisis in global governance. The United Nations, operating under the United Nations Charter, retains a mandate to maintain international peace and security. However, its effectiveness is increasingly constrained by structural limitations, including the frequent use of veto power within Security Council and inconsistent enforcement of international norms. This is not a failure of intent, but a reflection of competing national interests and institutional inertia in a rapidly evolving multipolar system. The task before us is not to abandon multilateralism, but to reform and strengthen it. In this context, civic actors and transnational networks play a critical role. History demonstrates their impact. The anti-apartheid movement helped dismantle an unjust system, and sustained advocacy contributed to the adoption of the Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. However, their effectiveness depends on credibility, on evidence-based analysis, coherence, and adherence to universal principles. Distinguished participants, allow me to conclude. We are confronted with a global condition in which over 114 million people are displaced. Over 300 million require humanitarian assistance. Civilians constitute up to 90% of war casualties, and over 200 nuclear weapons remain on high alert. This is not sustainable equilibrium. The path forward requires a recalibration of our priorities. We must reinforce international humanitarian law, evaluate economic policy through their human impact, revitalize arms control frameworks, and strengthen both institutional and civic accountability. Ultimately, the legitimacy of any system, national or international, rests on a single fundamental criterion: its capacity to preserve human life. Where that capacity is insufficient, reform is not optional, it is imperative. Thank you so much. I remain Emmanuel Mihingo Kaija, and today's address has been primarily focused on global civilian protection and escalation risks in contemporary conflict. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emmanuel Mihinga Kaija, for this report. We must firstly deeply understand that the rules destroy the world following a certain ideology. Nations are being pitted against each other and quarreling, but we have nothing to share with you. We want to be friends and live peacefully. Only we the people can intervene in this if we just want to live. Our will creates our future. And if we are silent, then we are agreeing with destructive plans. Therefore, today, as representatives of different countries, we say no to wars, hunger and poverty. We invite our next speaker from Belgium, Anne Lellement, an independent journalist, the Belgium Citizen Reporter channel.
Bonjour à tous, je suis ravie d'être invitée.
Hello everyone, I'm glad that I was invited to the conference We Want to Live. I'm an independent reporter from Belgium. I run a channel, Belgian Citizen Reporter. Due to the circumstances, I realized very quickly that there are indeed intentions to take power over people on a global scale. I am pleased to participate in this great forum against genocide and crimes against humanity, to be able to explain that as citizens we strongly disagree with what is happening. Unfortunately, we are now dependent on the fact that at the national level some presidents who are clearly serving the common goal of enslaving humanity have come to power. Indeed, we have realized many things since the organization of the pandemic, which was ultimately an artificial pandemic, and the vaccination that was imposed using an injectable product that was not sufficiently studied. Now we see that there are dramatic consequences of side effects and numerous deaths because of this. Therefore, I do not like to use the word vaccination, but rather the toxic injections that were given to the population in order to, at least, we can assume, to destroy part of the population. So, we have also noticed that the elites are responsible and at all levels for ritual murders and cannibalism, acts of pedophilia against children, young girls and young boys in order to also feed on the energy of the population. And that is not all, as we have also realized that we are under the financial hegemony of several banks that are taking control of the states as if it were an organized mafia that was draining the little money we had left. So nothing has changed. We're still in the Middle Ages, where these elites have the right of the first night on our children and keep us in a state where we are struggling to make ends meet, thus preventing us from rising up. But at the moment, it's becoming increasingly difficult to restrain the population because I think people are becoming less and less trusting. We also realize that there is intention to lead humanity into a global war. Moreover, it's a nuclear war, and the threat is becoming extremely serious, as all world powers possess nuclear weapons, and we see that we are being led by mad individuals who are clearly unafraid to use these weapons against their own people. They're dragging us into a war that we do not want, and I think it is time for us to take on our civic responsibility and make a decision about our future. We have voted, but we haven't been heard. These votes have been useless and manipulative. People have realized this in the United States, France, and other countries where votes have been manipulated to bring to the forepoint individuals who are being manipulated and controlled by the World Economic Forum. So we are all aware of this, and I believe that people now have enough information to understand that governments do not actually want what is best for us. Instead, they want to significantly reduce the population. Just remember the Georgia Guidestones Monument, those famous memorial plaques that were found in the United States, where it was clearly stated that the population should be reduced until there were only 500 million people on the planet, that they should start working on genetics to increase the value of people and make them more manageable, and that they should limit the number of births. We can see that even in France, there is an incredible decline in the birth rate and a noticeable increase in the death rate. So we have crossed a threshold, and we're at the point where there are more deaths than births. This is very alarming. It is also alarming that even at the level of education, young people are being dragged down. As a result, we have an education system that aims to reduce the IQ of the population. This year was a turning point again, as it was the first year that IQ decreased. So we have to really wonder why this is happening. We must understand that these young people whose IQ is declining will become responsible for one or another area of our lives tomorrow. They may be ones who will operate on us. They will be ones who will manage us, treat us, and manage our economy. So, can we say that this is reliable? No, we understand that the level of knowledge is indeed falling and the people are degrading. The ratings that we see on the computers, if you look at Google, you'll notice that all information older than 10 years is disappearing, being erased. In other words, the information is being erased from us, and they're also doing everything they can to eliminate the older population, which is the only thing connecting us to previous generation. So, what will happen at a certain point? This means that there may be a reset of history and population. By observing history, we have realized that there is a reset every 300 years. It is no coincidence that we see buildings buried under tons of dirt today, as well as catacombs with millions of bones. We don't know where they come from, as history tells us a different version of reality. So, how should we act? Yes, I emphasize that it is necessary to bring the lies of this system to the surface. This is very important, but it is not enough to expose them. We must also take responsibility. And at the moment, I think that 2026 is an important year to be able to put into practice all the skills we have acquired in the past few years. All the knowledge we have gained will be useful in creating the world of tomorrow. We understand that there has been an incredible increase in population. In a century, we have gone from 2 billion to more than 7.7 billion on Earth. And we can ask ourselves, how is it possible that there have been so many births, given the wars and other crises that have occurred? Well, I can say that we may have chosen to incarnate during this period of humanity to support a paradigm shift. Therefore, it is crucial to recognize that we all have our part of responsibility. Now we understand that scientists are increasingly grouping together to explain that we are much more than we think. That is, we are pure consciousness and have abilities that are much higher than we are told. If we look at the occult writings, which are not always accessible to everyone, we realize that we have extraordinary abilities. The military conducts research on the physical abilities of certain individuals. Certain people who can block, have different talents, have intuition, be able to read minds, and so on. So it's a good thing that we have abilities that go far beyond what we think. We think we have 5 senses, but in reality there are many more. And we have this ability to create the world that we want to see. So I think that at this point it's better to focus on what's starting and being built, rather than on the deadly destructive information that is also a great illusion. Because in any case, we understand that everyone is playing on the same team and for the same boss, with the goal of closing the calendar for 2030. It's amazing, but think about it. There's no date after 2030. The World Economic Forum's program ends in 2030. And then I ask myself, what happens after 2030? We see that everything is changing and everything is being turned upside down. We are at the end of the paradigm. We are at the end of the generation that the Incas were talking about. Since 2012, we have truly changed the paradigm and entering the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is an air sign and a sign of renewal. Aquarius is a feminine energy, and we can say that it is an energy of creativity. We must use our creativity to make it a reality, because it is important to support the world of tomorrow. Each of you has your own share of responsibility. We cannot say that we are not engaged in politics from the moment we worry about our future. We are all engaged in politics for the sake of our society. What should we do for our society then? Act locally. Try to improve life at the local level. Take responsibility in your villages, towns, and municipalities, just as the French and other nations do. You must try to become an acting person in your region and take responsibility. You cannot criticize or point fingers at people who do things for you because you have given them a place. Today, you already understand that these people are not here to support you, but to destroy you. Today, now, take back the role of the main characters in your life and create the world of tomorrow. You have the power to radiate what you want to see in your life. Science is really coming to the conclusion that we have the potential for creativity. We need to return to spirituality. I think that since the time of Galileo, we have been living in a world where everything is constantly measured. We have abandoned the divine paradigm in order to build a materialistic paradigm. And now we are finally realizing that we have been wrong. People today are obsessed with consumption. They are materialistic and have become drowned in excessive consumption. And we are already seeing that this leads to nothing but the destruction of all life. We are here to be the guarantors, the protectors of our garden. We have come to defend the territory that has been given to us for lease. Because we are living beings, we are here temporarily. But remember that our children will inherit what we leave them. Our parents may have made a mistake, but it is our responsibility to give our children a little more. Let's not just look at ourselves as little people. Think that one day you may reincarnate and you would like to come to a good place. If we knew that we are one, that we are actually far from the illusion of separation, that every person we meet is a part of ourselves, well, we would live in both respect and love. And this is the foundation. I think that if we lived in love, love is not about pink hearts and butterflies. Love also means being strict. It means being able to set boundaries. When you have a child, you set boundaries for him. We don't let him run on the road because we know he'll get hit by a car. Well, as individuals, we must be able to set our own limits. We must be able to say no. It's a little magic word that we haven't been taught to use. Right now, we must declare civil disobedience, not necessarily through violence, but through creation. Use that fury that you have inside you to become the driving force. Remember that Christ overturned the tablets of the temple, but he didn't fight. No, he was always calm. He always set an example of how to find your true self, find your inner flame, connect with yourself, and become the person you were meant to be. Remember who you are. Stop playing with identities and truly become the people you need to become. You become powerful when you are in your true embodiment. Know your mission. Start understanding your mission. And it is where you vibrate the most that you will be the strongest. So if you have teaching skills, teach. If you have conflict resolution skills, do it. Be in the discussion, have a debate, try to find solutions. If you're in the field, if you are a farmer, go ahead and do it. Create new things, create teams, create a network of people. We are one. Remember, they are doing everything they can to separate us, but we are one. So let's not let ourselves be deceived and follow their desire to divide us. Let's find what unites us instead of what divides us. Yes, we don't always have the same ideas or opinions. Yes, we don't come from the same places. Some come from the right, some come from the left, but ultimately we have the same motivation to live. We want our children to live in a better world. And that's the only goal we have. We don't need pedophiles, we don't need cannibals, we don't need people who destroy the elderly. We don't need people who prevent us from living freely and who prevent us from raising our heads, breaking free from oppression and earning money. Thank you very much.
We move on to the second block, which focused on the purposeful crises and wars organized by the global oligarchy throughout history. Today, the methods are no longer hidden. It is now widely acknowledged that both world wars and the 1918 to 1920 Spanish flu pandemic were orchestrated by the same global elite. Zbigniew Brzezinski, former advisor to the US President on national security, said, "This crisis will never end as long as we do not achieve our goals. Our goals are well known to you. It is a single world government. That's what we need. And it will be formed, whatever you like this idea or not. Further, everything will only get worse and worse. This is not a crisis. It is a controlled chaos. Society must not only accept the idea of a single world government, but also see it as its only salvation. This requires wars, famines, and epidemics around the world. Most recently, we experienced a well-known pandemic of an identified virus which caused the entire population of the planet to have nightmares. Through the pandemic, it is also clearly seen that policy in all countries is the same and is conducted in a coordinated manner. In this case, according to the protocols of the WHO organization, created by the same elite. The consequences of the pandemic are catastrophic. Medicine, the economy of many countries have been destroyed, and most importantly, the health of the population has suffered after an illegally imposed medical procedure. We invite our next speaker, Irina Prokusheva, a gynecologist and endocrinologist from Kazakhstan, who will tell us how vaccination has affected fertility.
Hello, dear colleagues. My name is Prokusheva Irina Petrovna. I'm a gynecologist and endocrinologist from Kazakhstan. During the COVID-19 pandemic, I observed a decrease in fertility in both men and women after both COVID-19 infection and vaccination. I have 30 years of experience and I have been monitoring the condition of my patients' ovaries. This is an indicator of AMH, the anti-Milei hormone, which shows the presence of healthy eggs. And in men, respectively, the spermogram. And unfortunately, I saw that both after the COVID and after the vaccination, the level of AMH decreases very much, and the level of spermatozoids decreases. I said this very loudly, but unfortunately not everyone listened to me. The chief reproductive specialist of our Kazakhstan said, how that could be, everything would be restored. In fact, 3 months later, I met the director of the Center for Reproductive Medicine who told me, Irina Petrovna, you were very right. After 3 months, nothing is restored. Now women who are vaccinated are going to have absolute infertility. Then there was an increase in tumor diseases, polyps, myomas, cysts, and endometrioid cysts. And that chief reproductive specialist, he also had a private center for reproductive medicine, and he didn't let his women in without vaccination. Now I understand that he had far-reaching plans to have these women come to him for IVF. Unfortunately, that's the case. I acted as an expert in court against our Ministry of Health in order to cancel that. And unfortunately, of course, we lost the trial, but the judge, she didn't have any children either, and when she heard that, she said, so we were sterilizing everyone? I said yes. In fact, sterilization is taking place. Unfortunately, it's no longer being restored. So be healthy, and you definitely don't need to be vaccinated.
Thank you, Irina, for your speech. After the sanitary crisis and the military conflicts, we are witnessing the active spread of famine according to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse: plague, war, famine, and death. Climate weapons are used, which provokes crop failures, forests and fields are burning on a huge scale, livestock and poultry are being destroyed under the guise of various diseases, under the WTO protocols, another globalist organization. We invite our next speaker from Russia, blogger and activist Anna Lebedeva, with a report of the destruction of livestock in Russia.
Hello everyone, my name is Anna Lebedeva and I am a blogger, journalist and someone who cares about what is happening in the world. In this speech, I'm addressing to all citizens of Russia as well as the global community. Currently, real tragedy is unfolding in Russia, where the authorities are using the pretext of a pasteurellosis epidemic to destroy livestock in various regions of Russia, without providing any documentation, taking samples or conducting animal tests, and in some cases even in the absence of the owner. illegally entering private property. This affected such regions as the Novosibirsk region, Altai, the Altai Republic, as well as the Omsk region. There are also reports from the Tomsk and Penza regions. People are being deprived of perfectly healthy livestock. Euthanasia is being carried out in front of their eyes. Animals are being taken to burial grounds and burned in their thousands. People in the villages are coming together to protect the animals, but veterinary services come with a police escort and detain citizens for allegedly unauthorized meetings. Two journalists who were covering the events, Ivan Frolov and Dmitry Polushin, have already been detained. Thankfully, concerned citizens and journalists are filming the events for mass publicity, so there is plenty of evidence of these facts on social media. I would also like to remind you that this situation and the practice of killing livestock under the pretext of various viruses began during the well-known pandemic in 2020-2021. Many regions faced the same tragedy. For example, in my region, the Kostroma region, pigs were burned and chickens were seized. There was even a case when 6,000 pigs were killed in a single incident at the Shuvalovo agro-holding in Kostroma. They also went to rural houses and counted the number of livestock in each house, and they seized chickens en masse. Similar situations occurred in many other regions, such as Krasnodar, Krasnoyarsk, Khakassia, Kurgan, Buryatia, Altai, and other regions. And now there's a new wave. However, according to residents of the Novosibirsk region, the large Irmin plant owned by Oleg Bugakov, a member of Putin's Yedinaya Rossiya party, continues to supply dairy products despite the alleged epidemic, and no livestock is being seized or destroyed. The authorities do not answer people's questions, and when they meet with them directly, they run away, ignoring the person and their questions. There's simply a lack of respect for the person. This is simply a lack of respect for the person, his feelings, and the tragic situation when he had the only source of income, investing his entire life and time in these animals. It is like having a family member that you see every day is raised and invest all your life and energy in. No one can clearly explain the nature of this terrible disease or the documents they rely on, referring to the confidentiality of information. Nowadays, the pretext of secrecy has become very popular in government responses. For example, when people ask the authorities about missile shelters in their city or village, the authorities respond that this information is classified. How can this be possible? When there is a missile threat, you don't know where to go for shelter. It's a secret. It's a convenient excuse to refer on secrecy. If we look at it more globally, the same thing is happening in France, Cyprus, and possibly other countries that we haven't heard about yet. In Russia, this is happening right before the snow melts, and it seems that there has been a recent sabotage in this area, as the water is not being released in a timely manner to allow it to flow smoothly from reservoirs and rivers, resulting in the sudden release of large amounts of water that have flooded entire villages and towns. 2 years ago, this led to a tragedy in the Orenburg region. And now thousands of cattle are being burned during the flood season. It seems that they're deliberately creating unsanitary conditions as the livestock will float into the rivers. Well, since we can see that all of this is happening on a global scale and that other countries are also experiencing similar things, What is really going on? We've all heard about the Schwab agenda and the WEF's fierce opposition to global warming and CO2 emissions. According to their program and theory, the main contributors to CO2 emissions and global warming are cows, but also other livestock. That is, even if we believe their theory of global warming, it is not the wars they unleash, the production and use of various types of weapons, or the wealthy lifestyle of the global elite on private yachts and airplanes, but the animals, ordinary farmers and agriculture in general, that are to blame. This is a clear case of manipulation and deception. As always, they're trying to blame the common people, even though they're the ones who created this system. And if we are talking about pollution and global warming, they're the ones who are much more responsible for the wars that the common people don't want, but they are dragging them into. Information is also circulating online that the World Bank has signed an agreement with Western countries to completely eliminate warming for net zero CO2 emissions by 2030. Maybe that's why all this is happening. This refers not only to animals, but also to crop production. That is, they want to deprive us of everything. And where the World Bank is, there are central banks of almost all countries. And we know that the Central Bank of Russia is also not a state-owned bank, but a private one, and reports directly to the IMF and the BIS, Bank for International Settlements. This is confirmed by completely open sources and the very nature of the central bank structure. So, the goal is to deprive people of their independence in terms of food and to reduce everything to globalization, which means that production will be taken over by a single large oligarch farmer in a region that follows the WEF's directives. And then we will be forced to consume insects, as I believe. After all, many countries are already introducing insects into their diets, and Russia has been operating larvae farms for several years, such as the one in the Tver region. In October 2023, Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin signed a decree on the release of the insect larvae into food products, such as the production of flour, mashed flies, and other products. This means that it has already been implemented at the legislative level. Imagine that. And in February 2024, major agricultural fairs were held in Perm, Moscow and Stavropol, showcasing food products made from insects. The global agenda is clear: total control in all areas and complete dependence on the state, whose management is highly questionable. This agenda implies to all key countries around the world. What should we, the citizens, do? In my opinion, and as practice shows, the only way out is to unite and build true democracy. In other words, we can only prevent everything that happens if we work together, because if we work separately, we will be swept away. This is possible, but we have been taught that we are insignificant, that nothing depends on us. Everything is decided by authorities. In reality, we, the common people, possess immense power, and the authorities are well aware of this. They are doing everything they can to prevent people from uniting and to divide them further. We've simply forgotten our strength, believing that we can't change anything, and became selfish and apathetic. However, if we unite in an organized structure, it will be challenging to break us. There are examples of this. When people come together and fight for their rights collectively, rather than individually, they are less likely to be targeted, as the power of unity and truth is greater than the illegal oppression of the system. In Russia, for several years now, people have been coming together in thematic committees based on their professions and interests, such as the Council of Parents, the Council of Teachers, and the Association of Doctors, who expose lies and abuse abuses in their respective fields, and protect the rights of children, teachers, medical professionals and patients, respectively, in an effort to establish and maintain a harmonious system in their respective fields. Additionally, people are coming together locally, forming councils in their cities and villages to address local issues. These councils communicate with each other, forming a network that is crucial for quickly addressing problems and sharing experiences. And also to strengthen the belief that you are not alone, that there are many of us, and that everything can be changed. To unite is to start taking joint actions on certain topics, common problems and interests. Such actions build up a close-knit and friendly team. It is difficult to break such a team. This has been proven in practice during the pandemic, where regions with active and friendly councils experienced a rapid relaxation and even cancellation of measures such as wearing of masks, lockdowns and distant education. On the contrary, regions where activity was weak or there were no councils faced more strict measures. There are also cases when groups have stood up against the illegal demolition of important buildings and for the cancellation of their construction, such as in Zarechny Depenza region, where residents united in a council successfully defended a children's stadium from local businessmen who want to build residential buildings and make a lot of money. However, they were unsuccessful in their efforts. Therefore, the collective is a huge force. And I believe that we must unite in this way in every country of the world, in every city and village. Otherwise, we will not be able to survive, and we will all end up in total slavery. We must also cooperate with other countries in order to receive accurate information and share the truth and experience of building people's democracy. Only then we will be able to achieve our goals, and we, the Russian people, despite the challenges and persecution of the system, have faith in victory. Thank you for your attention.
The financial globalist organization of the IMF and the BIS drive countries and the population into loans. And in recent years, they have been actively introducing digital currency through central banks that are directly subordinate to the IMF and the BIS. And digital currency is already a complete lack of freedom for the population, as it is completely controlled and can be programmed for a specific period, territory and expenses. And all the supposedly fictional movies, such as In Time, are becoming a reality. The UN organization designed to protect peace on earth, on the contrary, allows all wars, as a result of which the rich become even richer and the common people become poor. The stratification of the population today reaches colossal proportions. 1% has everything and 99% has practically nothing. As a result, we kill each other for their enrichment and enslavement. We invite the next speaker from Germany, peace and freedom activist.
Hello everybody. My name is Michael Pieper. I'm a German engineer and I've been working as a consultant for more than 30 years. After that I started my own business and now I'm working on water purification and I do this already since 8 years. I was asked to talk a little bit about the situation in Germany and tell you a little bit about it. How it feels to live here and how we feel about the politics, economy and the social life here. Politics in Germany are still influenced a lot by what happened in the last century. In the last century, Germany lost 2 big wars and that still has a very great influence. After the end of Second World War, Germany was occupied by the Allies. The Allies, that is the USA, the USSR, France and Great Britain. Until now, we don't have a formal peace treaty or anything like this. So it is not quite clear if we are still in the status of an occupied country or if we are an independent country. In fact, Germany, and especially the German government, still strongly depends on the US policy. A good example for this is the statement of the former US President Joe Biden on February the 7th in 2022, when German Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz first came to the US. At the press conference, speech came to Nord Stream 2. This pipeline should go operational within the next half year or something like this. But in fact, the US were not, or US government, I have to say, was not very fond of it, because it meant that Germany could get very cheap gas, cheap energy from Russia. And Joe Biden said, if Russia invades, that means tanks and troops crossing the border of Ukraine again, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring it to an end. And on the question of a journalist, how he would be doing this while this pipeline is under German control, he answered with a smile, "We will be able to do that." Well, and last not least, we know what happened on September 26 that year. But the US is not the only power to control German government or have influence on the government. The EU, which started some 60 years ago as an economic organization, has become a major force in politics, finance, financials, and even the military. The EU rules by regulations concerning health policy, climate change, censorship and financial blackmailing, and probably undercover operations. Several financial scandals prove that the EU bureaucracy is deeply corrupt. Remember the $44 billion deal Ursula von der Leyen, the chief of the EU, made with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla. Ursula von der Leyen, she was placed in her position by the former Bundeskanzler Angela Merkel. Of course, after she had failed as a Minister of Defense in her cabinet. The complete institution, in my eyes, is far away from democracy. Well, let's now take a look at Germany inside. The present government is a coalition of the two bigger parties, the CDU, Christ Democratic Conservative, and the SPD, Social Democratic, well, kind of socialists. The opposition in the parliament could be led by the right-wing conservative AfD, although the AfD is the strongest opposition fraction in Bundestag. It is banned by all other major parties and excluded from most working groups and even from leading political functions. There are several decisions of our government that divide the country's population. The unconditional support for Israel and Bibi Netanyahu, for example. Also the support of the Ukraine in its war against Russia. First it started just with some helmets, I guess, in 2022, but soon was followed by small weapons and tanks and, well, and billions of euros. The German Bundeskanzler Friedrich Merz has an all-time low in popularity. Latest polls say that more than 75% of the population in Germany are not satisfied with this policy. This includes the missing of any actions to strengthen the economy or even to lower fuel prices or energy prices. I hope it is also the growing militarism, which costs hundreds of billions and tries to force young people into a future war. I hope this makes also many people disagree with our government. There are some protests from school kids and from students, but it's not as much as we used to have for Fridays for Future or some other protests. It seems many people in Germany still think elections would probably lead to a better policy. A party like AfD might bring some changes, cure the economy, secure pension funds, reform health system, and provide solutions for ongoing migration and the follow-up programs. It seems that many people still think the elections would probably lead to a better policy. That a party like the AfD might bring some changes, cure the economy, secure pension funds, reform the health system, and provide solutions for the ongoing migration and follow-up problems. I strongly disagree, but we'll come to this later. Let's now have a look at the economy. Germany used to be what was called the locomotive of Europe. A strong economy with a major financial input for the EU and also a strong influence on EU policy. The German economy depends on high quality export, for example cars, machinery and process facilities like high-tech heavy industry. Many of these depend on know-how, but also on low energy costs. This is where we have to face some problems. Climate change policy, sanctions, war, and last not least the Energiewende, which means exit from nuclear power and reduce fossil fuels. Subsidies for solar and wind power make energy more expensive in Germany than in any other country in Europe. Many companies avoid this by moving the facilities to cheaper countries. More and more jobs get lost. Automotive industry faces another problem on top. China dominates the electric vehicle market and closes the gap for conventional cars as well. The only growing sector seems to be defense right now. Even some automotive companies already shifted production from civil production to militaries. This might save some jobs for some time, but is by far not sustainable. There's mostly only one client in the order books, and that is German government or associates. Now we come to a point where politics and economics meet. The public expenditure quote. In Germany, it is a little more than 50%. Every second euro in Germany goes through public cashiers. In reverse, that means that 50% of all value produced is taken by the state and its institutions. Assigned with high energy costs and an immense bureaucracy, taxes and dues strangle the whole economy. This is true not only for companies, but also for every individual. And this leads us over to the next point. Social aspects. Social aspects in Germany. Through the last 10 years, people began to feel a loss of prosperity. The wages still grew a little bit, but the cost of living for housing, mobility, energy rose more, especially from 2020 on, and it seems to be accelerating. Many families had to compensate this through a second income, which means less time for children and family care, of course. On the other hand, we see health services getting less, while the contribution rises constantly. The public pension fund is getting close to collapse, and the average pension in Germany is not much more than the minimum income of what you might get from job center if you have no income, like many of the migrants who came to Germany mostly from 2015 and in 2022 as refugees from the Ukraine. This is a great burden for all public funds and for the health system, and even for law and order. Crime rates rose in line with a growing number of migrants from the Near East and Northern Africa. Clans or families took over the power in some city districts, and police forces seem to be helpless. People see the problems, but the government is not willing to take action. You might expect that someday there will be a large and powerful demonstration against the government, like we had in 2020 against the COVID doctrine. But not at all. The crisis we are facing has so many facets. Many people do not see the complete picture, and it seems to be impossible to unify the protest. And last not least, Germans will not start a revolution. We were brought up to obey and to accept. The majority of the people in Germany still feel quite comfortable. They still listen to government propaganda, published every night on television and mainstream media, hoping that things will get better or wait for the next election, which will bring new faces but the same agenda. I guess things must become much worse before we can form a strong protest or maybe overthrow the government. So let me now come to a conclusion, or better give you some of my ideas, what we might do to avoid another great war, violent riots, or a complete chaos. Since 2020, the German economy is in recession. One important reason is the cost for energy. Germany decided to move away from nuclear power and the use of fossil fuels and rely more on renewable energy. Well, but this, of course, led to much higher costs for energy, for households and also for the industry. Next step was the decision of our government to stop the use of cheap Russian gas in 2022 as a result of the special operation of the Russian army in the Ukraine. This is not a good prospect for German economy at all, except one sector, the defense sector. This is massively driven by the government or by government orders. Our Minister of Defense, Pistorius, he wants Germany to build up the most powerful army in Europe within the next 4 or 5 years. And they openly say in Parliament that they expect a war with Russia within 2029 or maybe even 2030. I think we have to do something to stop this. There's another thing that frightens me. It's a word used by German politicians, and we hear it in the media nearly every day, and that is kriegstüchtig, which means to be able to go to war. Everything in Germany is going to be kriegstüchtig. The economy has to be kriegstüchtig. The health service has to become kriegstüchtig. Even the schools have to become kriegstüchtig, and the whole society must be kriegstüchtig. I strongly disagree with this. I think we should be ready for peace. We have to keep peace in Germany and in Europe. This is more important. And the only thing that we can do is we have to take away the fear, because all the propaganda is based on fear. We are kept in fear of a Russian attack that might happen within the next couple of years. And if we are able to take away the fear and build up friendship with Russia, I think all these propaganda will lose its base. And then we can really build up a strong movement for peace in Germany. It is up to us, the people in Germany. We have to declare peace, not war. We have to do this because our politicians won't do. We have to declare our sovereignty. Sovereignty from this government we have currently, sovereignty from the US, of course, sovereignty from the European Union, sovereignty from the NATO, of course. We could be a strong Germany again, but a strong and peaceful Germany. That is my vision for Germany. Thank you.
We thank Michael and pass the floor to the team from France, Vision 360 A Plus, in the person of Jean-Jacques, Valérie and Jean-Yves.
Bonjour, nous nous présentons Valérie,
Jean-Jacques,
Jean-Yves.
Hello, we are Valérie, Jean-Jacques and Jean-Yves. We are French and members of the collective Vision 360 ET+, whose aim is to share information that differs from what is disseminated by those in power. Our collective is based on Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Since 2020, we have been firmly exposing science, religion, and party politics as the holy trinity of lies. It's time to call things by their proper names. Humanity has been imprisoned in a toxic triptych for centuries that has drained its consciousness. Contraband science, which we call scientism, false religion, and corrupt party politics. Together, they form a perverse trinity, a machine of total control, run by a certain caste for far too long. This is the true scourge of humanity. We are lulled, divided, and prevented from reaching true liberation. Our attention is diverted from what truly matters, the return to our inner world. We position ourselves as questioners, those who refuse to believe blindly, who always question official narratives, who connects the dots and gleams a picture beginning to emerge, even when we are told there are no dots to connect. Those who know that asking questions is not a disease, but a sign of a good mental health. Since our communication is hindered by those at the top, we believe it can still spread from below, through so-called background noise, via friends, family, and so on. To spread our message, we published an article on our website Vision 360 ET+, and have decided to release a book entitled Chronicles of an Upside-Down World. Imagine for a moment that almost everything we have been taught about the world is upside down. That illness doesn't always correspond to what we are told, that truth is often labeled as false, and that freedom is presented as a public danger. The book, Chronicle of an Upside-Down World, is not a catechism. It's not a tribunal. It is not the work of a guru claiming to hold absolute truth. After many years of research, cross-checking data, reading, testimonies, and often hidden documents, we decided to gather everything we have seen, heard, and experienced. Not to convince at all costs, but simply to leave a trace, so that tomorrow no one can say, "This never happened." This book is the kicking on anthem, an invitation to look behind the mask, to break free from the many mental cages in which we have been locked for too long. Let us ask ourselves, what if another vision of the world, even when it seems impossible, could allow us to change course before it's too late? That is the challenge. The book uses the first-person pronoun I, but now that it doesn't refer to just one person. This I is you in 2020, when you turned off the television because something deep inside no longer felt right. It is the healthcare worker who was applauded from windows, then suspended months later. It is the mother who decided to protect her children at all costs. It is the elderly man who muttered, "They think we are idiots," while watching the evening news. It is also the one who complied out of fear, but knew deep down something was wrong. Across more than 60 chapters, we invite you on an uncompromising journey into this upside-down world. It begins by questioning the very foundation of our understanding of health. The book Contrast Pastoral and Baysham explores the forgotten work of Nikola Tesla and questions the true nature of disease, relying on numerous testimonies and research from scientists who have long been censored. It then moves to the core of crises we have all experienced. the COVID-19 pandemic. Was the virus known as SARS-CoV-2 really isolated? This is a fundamental question. Is virus isolation merely computer-based construct? Another fundamental question: what do the Pfizer documents actually say? Where some scientists write about certain points that were deliberately ignored. The book takes a close look at mRNA vaccines, the role of Robert Malone, Carrie Mullis, and many others, the fate of the unvaccinated and those whose vaccination was halted, as well as how children and the elderly were treated. It raises a troubling question: has collective fear become the only truly contagious disease of the 21st century? Beyond healthcare, we examine the mechanism of information control, the monopoly of a few billionaires over official news channel, the role of big pharmaceutical companies, Hollywood and its programming, the Overton window, and the Mandela effect. The book then addresses major power consolidation projects: the New World Order, the Great Reset, social engineering, gender theory, and the forced march towards transhumanism. From an economic standpoint, it highlights the role of central banks and three giants, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, which effectively own much of the world. The book also questions major environmental narratives. Are wind and solar energy truly green? Is climate change only what we are told it is? What lies behind chemtrails, HARP, or the sabotage of French nuclear energy? Finally, the book dares to challenge the most sacred dogmas: Darwin's theory, the collapse of mainstream science, the moon landing, and even the true nature of space. This is not a linear book. It is a kaleidoscope. Each chapter is a piece of a puzzle that, when assembled, reveals the same hand behind many domains: healthcare, economy, politics, science, environment, information. But this book, Chronicles of an Upside-Down World, doesn't merely present a bleak picture. Above all, it reminds us that we are not powerless. The only weapon they can never take from us is our frequency, our inner vibration, our ability to say no through silence and dissent. It highlights those who are already resisting and winning, often without even realizing it. Certain communities reflecting back to us the mirror of our modern dependency, and all those who question and have chosen to reclaim their sovereignty. It also offers concrete paths to reclaim our power, protecting our children, strengthening our constitution, taking an active role in our health, cultivating doubt, reconnecting with life, refusing to look away in the name of comfort, and above all, rejecting fear. To conclude, this book is not there to convince, it was written to invite you to ask yourself questions, and remember that this whole system, no matter how powerful it may be, is based on a single thing: our silent obedience. Refuse this obedience and the house of cards collapses faster than they built it. They have the money, the media, the laws, the algorithms. We have the number and the power. And when the number wakes up, when millions of people calmly say, "No, thanks," then the system collapses. This is the message we want to convey, and we will not stop. Thank you for listening. Sincerely. For your information, this book is not sold through traditional channels, but it can be downloaded for free in PDF format from the website www.vision360etplus.fr.
Let's move on to block 3 and discuss the essence of so-called global elite. Their essence lies in Satanism and fascism. The world is already familiar with the theory of the golden billion, which suggests that there are not enough resources on Earth for everyone and that useless eaters should be eliminated. Bill Gates openly advocates for population reduction during the vaccination campaign. But their very essence has already been revealed by the Epstein files. They are Satanists, cannibals, and pedophiles. And the scale is much larger than we think. The top structures of many countries are committed to these values. The facts are regularly surfacing in Belgium, France, Russia, and other countries, but they are also regularly being ignored. For example, in Russia, a pedophile network in the upper echelons was exposed by Maxim Marcinkevich several years ago. For this, he paid with his freedom, and then was tortured and killed in prison. And we think that these people care about our health and well-being? About the Epstein files and how they unite Putin, Trump, Zelensky, and how Vladimir Putin came to power, we will be told by Natalia Lomanova, a public activist from Russia.
Greetings, dear friends. The world has been shocked by the Epstein files and the list of world leaders and world-class celebrities who appear in the files. The Epstein case exposes presidents, billionaires, religious and show business people. The Trumps, the Obamas, Biden, Harris, Clinton, Macron, Putin, Zelensky, Pope John Paul II, Prince Harry, Prince Andrew, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and many others. The list includes over 300 names of global elite representatives. The crimes described are monstrous: rape, pedophilia, murder, even cannibalism. For example, one of the victims, Katie Johnson, claimed that she was brutally raped multiple times by Trump, acting US president. The girl was only 13 years old at the time. Two separate individuals, calling the FBI years apart, made the same allegation. Girls were murdered at Donald Trump Rancho in California and buried on the property. These non-humans consider themselves to be superhumans, demigods who can do anything. In Russia, officials happily comment how terrible it is in the West, how depraved and evil politics are there. Putin once said, quote, "For centuries they've been accustomed to filling their bellies with human flesh and their pockets with money," unquote. Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, put it, "pure satanism." Yet, the current Russian system of power was built by the US elite. Indeed, in 1993, American CIA carried out coup d'etat in Russia, their actions being ensured by then Russian President Boris Yeltsin. The Presidential Library of Bill Clinton has declassified more than 1,000 documents related to Russian-American relations in 1990, and the released archive includes previously classified transcripts of conversations between then US President Clinton and then Russian President Yeltsin. According to the transcript of September 8, 1999, Yeltsin told Clinton about his future successor, Vladimir Putin, which was well before elections, right? During the conversation, which took place on November 19, 1999, Clinton returned to the topic of succession and asked Yeltsin who would win the election. Of course, Putin, Yeltsin replied, quote, "He will be successor. He is a Democrat and knows the West," unquote. Quote, "He is very smart," unquote, Clinton responded. Why did the US care so much to set their protege to be the president of Russia? Well, one of the reasons was to get Russia's resources through puppet rulers and therefore to rob the Russians. To ensure control, they did this in secret. A sham of quarrel between Russia and the US has been acted out. Yet resources from Russia have been extracted by the US so far, and therefore there is no quarrel, as a matter of fact. Current Russian elite was set by American elite and profess the same principles and follow the same lifestyle. That is, its exclusivity in laws and permissiveness. So Epstein's files disclose the pedophilic nature of American elite. But what about Russia? What about Russian elite? I guess there are a lot of people around the world who consider Putin to be nearly saint, to be savior of the world. But what do Epstein's files tell us about Putin? It seems Putin met Epstein, and according to a special agent's report, Epstein was Putin's wealth manager, which is interesting in itself. On the other hand, there are a number of Russians who obviously were assassinated because they knew or intended to go public with evidences proving that Putin is pedophile as well. For example, Alexander Litvinenko, former FSB officer, wrote that Putin was filmed in a safe house in bed with 2 little boys. Following this, several criminal cases were opened against Litvinenko in Russia. Litvinenko and his family fled to the United Kingdom, where he received political asylum and died. The cause of his death was polonium poisoning. Artem Borovik, editor-in-chief of top-secret newspaper, also wrote about Putin's sexual perversions a week before his mysterious death. There are numerous photos of Putin at public events stroking boys' backs. There was much publicized story of little boy Nikita, whose stomach Putin kissed in front of an stunned audience. It turns out that the FSB's internal security department had a video recording of Putin having sex with underage boys. According to the materials of the investigative team headed by Lysenko and Katchev, the deputy prosecutor general of Russia, Putin created an entire system of selling children abroad through the orphanage in the central district of St. Petersburg. Vladimir Volodin, Russian State Duma speaker, it turns out gets children, including infants, from orphanages to his dacha in Saratov region. The perverts rape children there, and the whole region knows about that. And there are more cases of pedophilia among Russian top officials. That's why recently the people of Russia have demanded investigation into the blatant immorality of Russian top officials. Russian people strongly believe that pedophiles have no place in power. One more interesting thing related to a connection of Epstein with Russian authorities. Sergei Belikov is mentioned in Epstein files. Belikov is a graduate of the FSB Academy, FSB being the principal security agency of Russia. Belikov served as Russia's Deputy Minister of Economic Development in 2012-2014. And what do we know about him? Belikov repeatedly helped Epstein to obtain visas to Russia. Belikov provided Epstein with a dossier on a Russian woman who, according to Epstein, attempted to blackmail a group of influential businessmen. Belikov reported to Epstein about Belikov's work for the Russian government. In 2011, the Moscow public organization Wimpel was listed as Epstein's host organization, Wimpel being an organization of veterans of the secret FSB unit Wimpel. I consider the situation outrageous, and so do my compatriots. But should we be surprised about similar deviations in elite of different countries, considering that official top leaders of Russia were set by US elite, not elected by Russian people? Every person is driven by their ideology. Although Trump, Putin, Zelensky are presidents of different countries, they are united by a single ideology, the ideology of Chabad. What can we do? We can and must express our distrust in all the world's shadow rulers and their puppets. Dismissing those we don't trust is our legal right and legitimate democratic process. Include the hashtags in your posts: Stop Globalism, Dismiss Presidents Who Serve Globalists, sign the petition. Record and distribute videos expressing your distrust of such rulers. Build real democracy. Unite with like-minded people in councils. Take your step toward freedom. Thank you.
We pass the floor to the next speaker, Igor Shnurenko, a writer, philosopher and independent expert in artificial intelligence from Russia.
Друзья, благодарю организаторов за возможность участия в международной конференции.
Friends, I thank the organizers for the opportunity to participate in the international conference. You know that the danger of nuclear war stems from the nuclear project that was launched several decades ago. There is another project no less dangerous, the Artificial Intelligence Project, which I write about in my book. My name is Igor Shnurenko. I'm a writer and an expert in the field of artificial intelligence. Today I would like to talk about my new book on another taboo subject, which is related to these two topics. This is the theme of Jeffrey Epstein and his circle. The AI project theme was launched back in the 1950s, a little later than the nuclear project. Discussions around AI is taboo in Russia. You can only write optimistic things about it. No criticism has been allowed for a long time. Everything is being done to ensure that people accept AI and give up the most important sovereignty. This is by no means the sovereignty of the state, but the sovereignty of a human being, because everything is in our heads. Now I'm going to talk about the Epstein circle. My book Epstein's Archipelago was published in Bulgaria in the publishing house East West. I was unable to agree on the publication of the book in Russia, as the topic is taboo there. Obviously, I will have to distribute it myself. I have already read several chapters from this book on my channel in Bastion. There are also links on my Telegram channel, Земля Свободных. In Bulgaria, the book has been published and has had reviews in well-known media, including 24 Hours. What is the uniqueness of my book? In general, Epstein's theme is presented as a description of the life of a lone monster who seduced everyone, molested everyone, lured everyone to his island. That he was very convincing, lured everyone to his island. There is a lot of information in the media, and there are a lot of videos which usually deal with shocking episodes that are not connected into a single whole. In my book, I give a lot of facts and a complete picture of what was happening. I am proving that Epstein is certainly not a loner. He is a representative of a large network of the most influential people of the planet. And this network began as a network of the world of finance. Then there were politicians, cultural figures, major scientists, owners of digital platforms, and above all, AI developers. The purpose of this network is for all members to be able to break any laws without problems and behave like superhumans, as a race of superhumans. This network is huge. It has been created for decades. I'm describing how it has been created since the early 1980s, and it involves hundreds and thousands of people. In Russia, this topic is taboo because, according to the most conservative estimates, more than 1,000 underage girls have been passed through it. According to Epstein himself, half of them were from Russia and Ukraine. You have to understand that there are hundreds and hundreds of girls. We do not know what happened to them, or if they are still alive. Information is available about several girls from Russia, but their names can be listed on the fingers of one hand, and there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And no investigation is underway, despite all the accusations and talk about cursed West. There are no investigations in Russia into the disappearance of these hundreds of Epstein's victims. I show that this network continues to operate even after the so-called death of Epstein in 2019, which is also highly questionable. I'm writing about this too. Now this network is a little bit hidden, but none of its representatives went to jail. Some of them, like Prince Andrew, were detained, but he spent less than a day in the police, and all remain unpunished. It is known that especially at the beginning of their work, these people, of course, solved important issues in their circle. For example, Epstein discussed the terrible disease with Bill Gates before it was launched. They made deals related to this, promoted the system. A couple of chapters of my book are devoted to how this network, Epstein and related people, promoted the AI. All the prominent developers have also passed through this network. Money was invested there. As I said, this is the world of finance. First of all, this network was created as a network of the world of finance. An interesting aspect. I call this network a swarm. Those who belong to it lose their individuality. Collective rituals are performed with underage girls and boys. To participate in these rituals, they make contributions to a common cause. Such contributions were made by millionaire Les Wexner and others. Wexner financed Epstein for decades and also got away with it. He was not even detained, although his very active participation in orgies was proven. And of course, the money trail. For any of these monetary transactions, any ordinary person would be locked up in prison. Interesting fact, in the 1980s, Epstein had a partner with whom he organized a pyramid scheme. Pretty quickly, this partner was made a scapegoat. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison and served 17 years. At that time, nothing was done to Epstein at all. He was not even detained. He was a witness in the case, testified, and nothing was done to him. There have been many such cases, and I am describing them. Such completely illegal transactions took place on a daily basis, but there was a powerful roof. Moreover, the roof is not only in the United States, including prosecutors, politicians, and presidents in the office at that time, but it's the same in Russia, where Epstein flew many times without any visas, including with President Clinton. He flew to different cities of Russia, took the girls on board. Of course, no one has investigated this. The most important thing is that the Epstein archipelago still exists. These are territories, islands, yachts, elite estates where human laws do not apply. They belong to the oligarchy, they belong to the Epstein king, the swarm. Zuckerberg, billionaire Larry Ellison, and many others have such islands. And the whole planet can become such an archipelago because Epstein brainwashed his victims with special techniques, special services, as well as drugs and medications, enforcing them to first become slaves and then accomplices in his crimes. And so, the methods of enslaving the population were worked out, eugenic methods. Among other things, the practice of creating a higher race, that is, he involved genetics. He raised his children like in an incubator. No one knows what happened to them. Nobody has investigated the situation. He sponsored relevant scientific developments. And he put these developments into practice, not only for enslavement, but also for development of slavery from within, making voluntary slaves out of people. This network continues to invest huge efforts, and all the money in the world is now invested in the creation and promotion of an AI system. All the prominent figures in this field were members of Epstein's network, and a lot of money has been allocated. Epstein's files help to see that the world is ruled by anonymous government. Those who put forward certain circles are wrong. This is an anonymous government with members lack personal characteristics. It's a product of the Epstein network that they launched a few decades ago. It has been developing. All the money in the world is invested there, promoted by the AI system. At the same time, it seems that there is no alternative, that we should not miss it. But we are already seeing how generative AI destroys the very possibility of human authorship of books that are already beginning to be rewritten. In general, the idea that people have no choice is very characteristic of the Epstein network. According to his documents, it can be traced how he kept telling his victims that they had no choice, that they had to go through all this, and after that he promised them some kind of advancement. But as a rule, he did not do this. Now this powerful roof continues to operate. It is engaged in discrediting sources, discrediting those who speak on this subject. It is done by the most expensive lawyers in the world, teams of agents. In my book, I prove this. They have been intimidating victims for many years. The most prominent of them, like Virginia Giuffre, died under very strange circumstances. She allegedly committed suicide, but it's very serious. It's clear that she was forced to. At the insistence of Congress, a lot of data was released on January 30, 2026. But at the same time, the published data of dozens of victims were leaked to the network so that they would be silenced, so that they would not say anything. As a matter of fact, we are dealing with a social experiment. This is not just exploitation of minors. It is a mechanism of loyalty linking world leaders, scientists, and billionaires. And there are absolutely a lot of Russian top names involved, too. They do not write about it. Nobody has investigated that. The normalization of perception of what was happening on the island is closely related to the ideology of transhumanism, according to which an ordinary person is just biological material. These orgies were not an end in themselves. They were part of a large social, psychological, and even biological experiment, and even the study of human control. How to break a person, how to turn him to be a willing participant in the brave new world. I'm also analyzing an enormous control system in which the biggest names end up being part of this network. My book is called The Epstein Archipelago. This is not just an investigation, but a warning. While the world is watching the screens, this anonymous government is rewriting the code of human itself. Now I'll show you a website where you can still find my books, but this opportunity will soon disappear because publishing houses in Russia have stopped contacting me. These are books: A World Without People, Human Hacked, Demon Inside, Kiev Leviathan, The Great Zeroing. These are the last copies. I urge you to think about it and urge you to find my channel on Boosty. I am mostly there now. I also publish my information in the Telegram channel, Land of the Free, and in my YouTube channel, but everything is too censored and processed there. There are a lot of bots. Thanks for attention. Success to the international conference. I was glad to participate.
Well, we understand that we are ruled by the occultists, and first of all, there is a spiritual war. Therefore, we also have to remember our spiritual power and understand that our creative will for the good is much stronger, especially if we united and organized. And we give the floor to our next speaker, Oleg Namazov from Azerbaijan.
Здравствуйте, доброго времени.
Hello, dear friends. I am from Baku. My name is Oleg Namazov. The topic of the conference I was invited to is the concern of nations and of people who possess conscience and common sense about the fact that the rulers of countries are leading the planet, human society, toward catastrophe. We do not agree with this. How can this be explained? And how can this madness that the so-called rulers are pushing us toward be stopped? As we know, the main drivers of catastrophes are human misunderstanding and confusion about what and why things happen. I personally studied different religions, the main religious traditions: Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, the Vedas. The meaning of the sacred scriptures has been lost. The codes have been lost. And there it is said, for example, in the Quran, Gur-an, which means, Gur is create, and is moment. This is related to Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. And La ilaha illa Allah, what does it mean? There is God, and nothing besides God exists or can exist. The so-called devil, Satan, Iblis, is merely ignorance. It is like the king's jester. The jester is the Antichrist, supposedly called Lucifer, Satan, Lilith. People use gadgets and mobile devices too much. This leads to zombification. Therefore, we come to the conviction that people must be educated. Not only educated in how to use them properly, but also not to immerse themselves too deeply in the use of gadgets. We see from the example of many children that they become too absorbed in shooting games, and then they confuse real life with the virtual one and begin to kill and wish death upon those who interfere with their games. That is, it is like a drug. I am very glad that people have finally come to their senses. They should not merely effectively elect so-called rulers, but should do so consciously and transparently. We know that Jews rule the world. Jews lend each other, for example, 10 rubles, and a month later he returns the same 10 rubles. And non-Jews. No, it is written in their Torah. This is the cause of all wars, and war is business. They consider us and other people to be non-humans. That is what is written for them. Give loans with interest to non-Jews. That is, with percentage. But in the Quran it is said that this is haram, that is, a sin. I advocate that these masters of world money come to their senses, and all the trillions of dollars and pounds sterling they have accumulated. They hide in bunkers, in villas, in Bali, wherever, but they do not understand what God is, what justice is. Even atheists have a conscience, and conscience is a small particle of God's presence. I have been in all religious centers. I conducted prayer as one of their own. Everywhere I found understanding. But in synagogues, when I was there, several times they beat me and spoke to me harshly. As at first they took me for a Jew. But then, when they learned that I was Muslim, for some reason there, I said, "This is God's temple. Why not pray?" Here I am praying. I showed Turkic culture there, because Turkic culture is not Turan. It is much older. Millions of years ago, it was not related to ethnicity, it is more related to the spiritual sphere, to sounds, vibrations, quanta. Generally speaking, people should unite around one idea, the idea of justice. And we can say, why kill? Insult? Wars must be stopped. Jews, Medvedev, Jews under such Russian surnames, but in reality they are Jews, Chabad, Lubavitch members as they are called, which is why they hide millions in their pockets. Pockets are such people who serve as wallets for their billions. This must also be stopped. The percentage system, the Committee of 300, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Baruchs, Gamers, Coons, and so on. Now they must work for the people whom they robbed, whom they set against each other, divided, and for whom they created these wars in order to launder their dirty money. They have wars, prostitution, the sale of women, the sale of organs, adrenochrome. These are the nightmares they engage in. They promote so-called homosexuality, although the color blue is a beautiful color of the sky. This is deliberately introduced. There is unstructured control over human masses, over the psyche, over the zombification of people. They think that Putin stands for Russia, but in reality he is destroying the gene pool of the Russian people. Just like that Zelensky. What is better? Previously there were slogans, man to man, friend, comrade, and brother. Well, back then, during the Soviet Union times. And now what do we get under capitalism? Man to man, wolf, predator of the forest, trickster, deceive and take more. And piggishness, meaning they do not care about your problems. Those are your problems, they do not care about them. So choose, comrades, people, what is closer to your heart. All the best. Until we meet again. Blessings and God's grace to all. Goodbye.
We smoothly move on to the fourth block, which explains their completely inhumane attitude toward the people and the ideology they live by. We live in an age of global lies being exposed, and the truth is somehow making its way to the masses. As it turns out, the rulers of key countries such as Trump, Putin, Zelensky, Netanyahu, and others are followers of the Chabad Lubavitch religious movement. The ideology of Chabad is described in their teachings of Tanya. In Russia, a study of Tanya book was conducted, which found signs of extremism, racism, and fascism. The next speaker, Svetlana Lada-Rus, the main critic of Chabad in Russia and a whistleblower of the main plans to destroy humanity, will tell us more about this. Let's listen to her opinion.
Уважаемые граждане мира, я, Светлана Лада-Русь, лидер Народного всероссийского оппозиционного движения, обращаюсь ко всем людям доброй воли. Все мы уже понимаем, что на земле творится неладное. Чья-то злая сила толкает мир к войнам, болезням и даже голоду. Такого ужаса на всей планете еще не было. Мой долг сообщить всем людям доброй воли, что очевидно всем движением к гибели рулит международная еврейская секта Хабад. Понятно, что такие планы на убийство человечества долгое время держались в тайне. Но сейчас информация об этом уже выходит в открытое пространство. Хабад представляет себя безобидной религиозной организацией. Но у традиционных религий Бог – это Творец и Создатель, а у Хабада Бог – это разрушитель, сатана. Об этом открыто еще в 2021 году сообщил раввин Реувен Файерман. Секта Хабад зовет и ждет прихода своего бога Мошиаха. Но мало кто в мире знает, что Мошиах условием своего прихода обозначает гибель человечества с закрытым ртом. В России изучена и проанализирована специалистами священная книга Хабада Тания. Проведена профессиональная экспертиза этого учения. В Тане прямо сказано, что Бог сотворил мир для евреев, а остальные народы являются рвотой и испражнениями. То есть противопоставляются этим учениям евреи и остальное человечество, которое считается у них недостойным существования на планете. Причем даже из евреев они считают достойными только 600 тысяч тех душ, которые вышли когда-то из Египта. Остальных простых евреев они также считают недостойными жизни. Я считаю эту идеологию причиной всех бед на земле, тех зверств, которые мы видели в Газе, Иране. Это хуже гитлеровского фашизма. Секта Хабад считает, что время существования человечества заканчивается, и Хабад хочет ускорить процесс исчезновения жизни на Земле. И потому они всеми силами организовывают ядерную войну. Как настоящие фанатики, они не боятся погибнуть вместе со всем человечеством, так как считают, что после этого окажутся в раю по воле Мошиаха. Сейчас секта Хабад пришла к управлению мировыми событиями, поставив своих людей во власть. В еврейской кипе, когда молились у стены плача, были замечены многие президенты и премьер-министры. Это Эммануэль Макрон, Николя Саркози, Барак Обама, Билл Клинтон, Джордж Буш, Борис Джонсон и многие другие. Евреи по национальности, а значит, скорее всего, и хабадники, бывшие и настоящие главы стран: Фридрих Мерц, Ангела Меркель, Хавьер Милей, президент Аргентины, Клаудио Шейнбаум Пардо, президент Мексики, Дональд Туск, Анджей Дуда и многие другие. Верхи стран имеют ту же идеологию. Основатель соцсети «Бастион» Даниэль Сачков писал: администрация Трампа почти полностью состоит из сионистов. Марко Рубио, Пит Хексет, Уолтс, Стив Уитков, Джаред Кушнер и другие. Зохран Мамдани, новый мэр Нью-Йорка, не мусульманин, а тоже хабадник. По словам Ходеса, Конгресс США управляется евреями в ручном режиме. Существует организация «Комитет американско-израильских дел», которая прямо курирует и диктует решения всем сенаторам Америки. Вокруг Путина та же картина. Матвиенко, Мишустин, практически все члены правительства, губернаторы и мэры – евреи. Хотя в России их всего 0,6% от 1% населения страны, меньше 1%. Создается впечатление, что сейчас важные должности получают только хабадники. Любая национальность, любая страна мира, если копнуть глубже, оказывается, что это член Хабада. Хабад связан со спецслужбами и работает под их прикрытием. Поэтому все преступления Хабада проходят тайно, исходят ему с рук. Потому все события мировые я считаю настоящим спектаклем, который разыгрывается перед нами на показ. Все это делается для того, чтобы мы согласились воевать и поверили, что все само так произошло. Но все в мире, что идет от руководства, проходит по расчетам Хабада. Но мы можем и не согласиться на роль жертв, и не подчиняться их расчетам на наше рабское состояние. И это самое главное в сегодняшней ситуации. В идеологии секты Хабада уничтожение человечества должно произойти с его согласия, с закрытым ртом. В идеологии Хабада в книге «Загар» сказано, что когда придет Мошиах, народы мира будут стерты с лица земли и уничтожены. Цитата. «И смерть их будет при закрытом рте, как смерть животного, умирающего без голоса и речи». Люди, поставленные от Хабада, ведут свои народы к войне и запрещают говорить о мире. В Украине и России приняты законы, запрещающие протестовать против войны. Это невиданно. Попирается право людей на желание жить. Но в этой ситуации у каждого гражданина планеты есть не только право, но и обязанность открыть рот, высказать мнение и объединиться со всеми людьми Земли, кто тоже хочет жить. И это не только граждане одной страны. Народы всех стран должны заявить, что они против войн, вражды, насилия, принуждения и подавления. Во всех странах мира сейчас демократия, а значит, граждане имеют право отправить в отставку ту власть, которая встала над ними и ведет их к уничтожению. Я призываю всех людей доброй воли открыть рот, рассказать всем о тайных планах Хабада на наше уничтожение, найти в рядах граждан своей страны людей, способных управлять в интересах населения, а не сатаны, Мошиаха. Все это в наших силах, если мы преодолеем страх, апатию и оцепенение, не дающие нам двигаться. Настали решающие дни в судьбе нашей планеты, а значит и каждого из нас. Войны в Европе и на Ближнем Востоке разгораются. И их ведут представители Хабада. Есть официальная информация, что Трамп вступил в Хабад, Нетаньяху также хабадовец, Зеленский продвинут Хабадом, Путин также является евреем и членом Хабад. Это сообщили открыто два раввина Радков и Лазар. То есть руками президентов Хабад продвигает свою цель – уничтожить цивилизацию. Все отношения, которые преподносятся как самостоятельные, на самом деле я считаю исполнением ролей, а суть их спрятана за ширмой. Это у них называется хуцпой, то есть наглым обманом. Смысл их актерской игры – создать распри, поссорить нас, народы мира, и довести до гибели. Также рукотворно создаются и другие смертельные опасности. Надвигается невиданный голод, появляются невиданные болезни. Все это спланировано и было в пророчествах святого Иоанна Златоуста. И только мы, простые граждане, те, кого хотят уничтожить, можем спасти себя сами. К этому недавно призывал Мохаммед Сафа, который, как Сноуден, Ассанж и Джон Коллиман, раскрыл миру планы элиты на скорую ядерную войну. И я, как правозащитник, считаю своим долгом призвать мир к спасению себя своими руками. Каждый гражданин доброй воли должен вложить все силы в раскрытие правды перед глазами общественности и разрушить планы уничтожения нас с вами. Нашим лозунгом должно стать «Люди доброй воли всего мира, объединяйтесь! Миру мир!»
Thank you, Svetlana Ladarush, for the speech. Our fifth block is dedicated to their plans and where they are leading us. They are leading us to the new world order, the kingdom of Moshiach on earth with a single religion of Satanism. This was mentioned by John Coleman, an English intelligence officer and author of the book Committee 300, as well as by some rabbis. All survivors will be linked to a chip that will contain all their documents and money. According to Klaus Schwab's ideology, which is actively promoted on the World Economic Forum, we should be deprived of all our property and completely depend on the state. Through the Smart Cities project and digital money, we become completely dependent, and if we make any moves that are inconvenient for the state, we may be disconnected from the system and become outcasts without means of survival, which could lead to our demise. To reduce the number of people who are outraged, there is already a fierce crackdown on human rights defenders and activists through repressive laws. Anna Lebedeva, a Russian blogger and human rights activist, will give an example of repressive laws in Russia.
Приветствую всех на международной конференции.
Welcome everyone to this international conference. Our country, Russia, is currently going through a difficult period. I believe that the Russian system is evolving not from a democratic system, but from an authoritarian one because everything suggests that. We are currently under an authoritarian regime towards a totalitarian system. An authoritarian system is usually easy to spot. It is characterized by vague laws and opaque enforcement practices. In other words, everything is done to discourage citizens from expressing their opinions. And with the use of such vague legal language, any citizen could be considered a criminal or excluded from society. In fact, our legislation already contains many laws of this type. I will discuss this in more detail later. Today we are witnessing a trend towards the establishment of a totalitarian system, the signs of which are also evident in our country. For example, in terms of patriotism, if we take the military sector, we find everywhere the symbol Z, heightened patriotic feelings, political actions and compulsive participation in patriotic actions, for both children and adults. We see this widespread propaganda in preschool, kindergarten, and primary school. In schools, a program called Conversations on Important Topics is held weekly. Veterans and soldiers from the special operation in Ukraine come to share their glorious memories. What patriots they are and what a wonderful time they had there, and they display weapons of war, explaining that all of this is normal and even necessary. This is a kind of militaristic attack against our children. And all of this is shaped by an immature mindset, presented as the correct ideology, as the correct militarized way of thinking. Furthermore, if we consider the ideological approach, it is clear that in a totalitarian system, there is always a state-approved ideology that outlines traditional values enshrined in official documents. We have Government Resolution No. 423, which approves a state program with values, that is, a political course that clearly spells out everything a person, a citizen of our country, should consider correct traditional values and everything they should consider unacceptable. Of course, this creates an information vacuum, and this is media selectivity. There are practically no independent media left in our country. They've been eliminated. And, accordingly, we're now seeing mass blocking of social media in this context. We have adopted and amended, I would say, several key laws that now criminalize dissenting opinions. The most striking law here is undoubtedly the one concerning foreign agents. A foreign agent is defined as an individual or legal entity that has come under foreign influence or receives foreign support. The form of this influence or support is unknown and not specified. However, in practice, we see that any citizen, regardless of social status, can be considered such only if they engage in political activity, without any influence or support whatsoever. A citizen with this status does not have the right to participate in elections. He does not have the right to hold public office or to conduct educational or outreach activities. But the most interesting thing is that the law has an exception. Officials, political parties, religious associations, and state corporations cannot be considered foreign agents, even if they have direct evidence of this and proven influence. Can you imagine? That is, it turns out that they are completely outside the law. However, we know very well that many officials hold dual or triple citizenship, and that they have assets abroad of varying sizes. We also know that their children study abroad. Yet, no one has assigned them the status of foreign agent, and they are considered law-abiding citizens. There is also a very important law on fake news, disinformation, and discrediting the army. This practice is now punishable, even though, when this term was introduced into the Code of Administrative Offences, a recent term to sanction true disinformation, false information, defamation, experts truly thought they would now punish people for false information, for fakes, for slandering someone. But in reality, discredit is attributed. For example, if someone uses the word war instead of the word SPO or special military operation, the word war is forbidden to be used these days, despite the fact that the president himself and many government officials use the term directly from television. Another very interesting fact is that the word discrimination can be used, and a person can be charged under this article even if they're telling the truth. That is, they haven't slandered anyone, they're telling the truth, they can back it up with facts. But the official media doesn't show it. It's not broadcast on television, it's simply an inconvenient truth. It's for this inconvenient truth that a person can be charged under this article. Another very important article, an amendment to Article 239 of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation, concerns non-profit organizations and citizen initiative groups that incite to evade their civic obligations. This means, for example, that any person or organization that encourages others to evade their civic obligations is liable to prosecution, criminal. But the most troubling thing is that it is citizen-led organizations and groups that have advocated against mandate vaccination during the pandemic are now being prosecuted. Indeed, Article 323 of the law of the Russian Federation stipulates that vaccination is a matter of free choice, not an obligation. Nevertheless, those who campaigned against mandate vaccination, given the numerous cases of coercion, are being persecuted and are still victims of political persecution. Moreover, a person in our country can be labelled an extremist simply for criticising a public official. The law on extremism has been amended regarding interactions with civil servants, as they now form a distinct social class, public officials. If a citizen approaches an authority to discuss issues affecting their neighbourhood, or catches an official mishandling their duties, that official can sue them for inciting hatred. The law forbids expressing any hostility toward public servants. In reality, citizens aren't attacking the officials themselves but rather questioning the outcomes of their governance, essentially offering constructive criticism. Yet, the narrative is so distorted that even well-intentioned feedback, which should encourage accountability, is twisted to portray citizens as insulting officials. Amendments have also been made to laws concerning information access. Now, searching for extremist literature can lead to criminal charges even unknowingly, as the Justice Ministry's website lists 500 pages of such material by title alone. Nobody can memorize 500 pages of titles. So people have simply stopped seeking alternative information. I believe this law's true purpose is to deter independent research and push citizens to rely solely on state-approved media. Meanwhile, to maintain a semblance of information freedom in the country, the government developed the Max Messenger app. This application is considered a national platform. They even amended consumer protection laws, requiring that this app be pre-installed on all smartphones. But in reality, it is much more than just a messaging app. It is a tool for total population control. Because Max Messenger is a centralized platform, a registry compiling all of a person's data, information about their health, financial status, credit history, employment, and education flows in from various services. Every aspect of their life is concentrated in one place. It partially replaces passports and certs as a payment method. It is also an app used to track individuals based on their attitude toward the government and their political opinions. It is even utilized in the education sector for school communications and relations. Thus, a person is assigned a rating of social status, which also functions as a control mechanism. At the same time, advertising for VPNs that allow access to messaging apps blocked by Roskomnadzor, Russia's media regulator, is prohibited in our country. Yet, it is worth noting that Roskomnadzor continues to manage its own Telegram channel after blocking it for the Russian population. So, what VPN does Roskomnadzor use if it has banned them all? A very interesting situation has arisen in the constitutional sector. The Russian constitution was controversially amended in 2020. It can hardly be called an adoption, as it was more of an approval. In fact, our constitution does not provide for an approval procedure. We have a clear referendum process for amendments, with participation thresholds, strict observer oversight, and a ban on altering officials' powers. But in our case, everything took a completely different turn. Parliament and the President had already drafted and coordinated the amendments. The President signed them, and citizens were simply called to approve them. With a single click, people voted for all 200 amendments at once, the entire package. It was impossible to reject just one. It was all or nothing. Either you voted for all 200 or rejected them all. The situation became so absurd that people were asked to vote from car trunks, playgrounds, park benches, and even tree stumps. Many of us witnessed this farce. Today, this mockery has been enshrined in the adopted constitution. The amendments concerning children are particularly alarming, as Article 76 now states that children are the property of the state. The next step was introducing amendments to laws regarding children and parents. In other words, juvenile justice. Article 150 of the Criminal Code on Petty Offences was amended to include a specific provision targeting parents and teachers. It states that if a parent involves their child in criminal activity, they face penalties, including arrest and loss of parental rights. But the most troubling aspect is how this article is applied in practice. A child can be taken from their family for reasons as minor as picking an apple from a neighbor's tree a petty offense, swimming in a prohibited area, or simply being spotted with their parent at an unauthorized public event. This is a blatant tool for controlling parents, who now fear engaging in public activities with their children. Additionally, parents with a low social rating are scrutinized, as family evaluations are already factored into school assessments. In the education sector, we are transitioning to remote learning due to a severe teacher shortage, unofficially estimated at over 50%, though officially reported as 25%. Therefore, everything is in place for distance learning. Simultaneously, Resolution 1678 is adopted, allowing school principals to unilaterally place a child in distance learning, without prior authorization, effectively isolating them from society. Parents have no rights or protections in this case. It is an absolute power granted to the school principal. Of course, various reasons can be cited, such as family instability or the child's fragile health. Thus, even in the absence of a school quarantine, if the principal simply believes, for example, that the child poses a health risk, they can easily isolate them from society. This, of course, raises serious concerns, as parents often adopt certain behaviors to promote their child's social integration. Additionally, in the education sector, we have adopted Resolution 1006, an anti-terrorism regulation, which requires schools across the country to organize simulated terrorist attack drills. These exercises are intended, in their logic, to teach children not to fear terrorists. But what actually happens? Trained and camouflaged men, armed with real weapons, storm into schools as if it were a real terrorist attack, teaching children to hide under tables. Naturally, this has had the opposite effect. Cases of heart attacks, bedwetting, and severe stress have been reported. Children are afraid to go to school. They are stressed, as are the teachers. Parents, too, are highly stressed, wondering whether they should send their children to school after such incidents. At the same time, according to the NUGA standards, National Standards and Evacuation Law No. 68, parents no longer have the right to pick up their child from school in case of an emergency, whatever it may be, especially during an evacuation. No one will be able to simply retrieve their child and take them home, according to the new law. The parent is now considered someone who could potentially leak information to third parties. As assured by the ministry, parents can only watch as buses transport groups of children to an unknown destination. We were told that it is also forbidden to reveal where the children are taken. This is classified information, even though parents are not considered third parties. In this context, a question arises: where are our constitutional rights? Where has democracy gone, or local autonomy? In reality, they no longer exist, because even in the realm of local autonomy, we have undergone a radical transformation and a reform. This is the municipal reform, which, I believe, definitively excludes citizens from direct governance of their country, as, according to the new law, the status of rural municipalities is being abolished. You know that Russia is an agricultural country with many rural municipalities. The status of rural villages is disappearing, and they are being merged into municipal agglomerations administered by a single appointed official. This official, appointed by the regional head, personally oversees everything, including finances. As a result, residents of tourist areas, endowed with protected spaces, become mere employees serving tourists, and local autonomy no longer exists. As for disadvantaged areas, so to speak, unprofitable for the government system, they are withering away. Populations are leaving due to lack of funding and becoming marginalized on their own lands. Thus, the fundamental principle of democracy, local autonomy, local governance of one's country is not only violated but completely obliterated by this reform, which transforms it into an authoritarian regime where an external authority governs and, moreover, protects these local communities with law enforcement. Considering environmental issues, we all know that we have just passed a scandalous law allowing deforestation around Lake Baikal. There are practically no forests left in this area. In the buffer zone, cedars have almost disappeared. Yet, despite this, the law was passed, and it now permits the exploitation of primary forests without expertise, simply through the online approval of an official. With such remote decisions, thousands of hectares of protected areas can be cleared and sold abroad. In other words, we believe that this law is fundamentally harmful to the environment. It brings no environmental benefit. This law aims to permanently transfer World Heritage sites to private interests. Lake Baikal has been seriously ill for a long time, and experts and environmentalists are well aware of this. Not only is its water unfit for consumption, but swimming is also prohibited. And even access to certain areas is banned due to the proliferation of toxic algae along its shores. Yet, environmental activists fighting to protect Lake Baikal are either outlawed or subjected to political persecution. A law aimed at removing the status of specially protected natural areas is currently being drafted and is already under consideration. This means that these areas, sanctuaries, national parks, nature reserves, and other spaces where the ecosystem remains intact could be liquidated at the whim of an oligarch, reclassified as luxury development zones, tourist complexes, and so on. This is not what the population truly needs, but it is what those who derive enormous profits from it require. And this phenomenon is even taking on an international dimension. In our country, there is a law called the Priority Development Area on Russian, TOR, which allows the complete transfer of a territory, along with its natural resources and associated assets, to foreign citizens under lease agreements. These territories, recognized as PDAS, have their own laws, codes, and regulations. In other words, they are true states within the state. Thus, foreign citizens become residents of these territories, which are typically prized for tourism or rich in natural resources. Over 70% of the national territory is already designated as PDA. It's truly a state within a state. On these territories, only the people remain, but ultimately stripped of their civil rights. A little more, and a totalitarian regime, so to speak, will fully establish itself in our daily lives. So, what can we do in all this? All we can do is unite, speak the truth, make it public, including at the international level, and offer a moral and ethical analysis of the actions of the power system. And I believe that the unification of civil society institutions is the only possible way to preserve the lives of citizens and, more broadly, the democratic constitutional order enshrined in our Constitution. Thank you very much.
And finally, the sixth block. What should we do? We must first understand that we, the people of goodwill, are much stronger and more numerous. We have been divided and made to believe that we are small, insignificant, and that nothing depends on us. However, no matter how hard they try, the people are waking up and asserting themselves. Those who have understood must help other sane individuals who have been deliberately covered with the apathy and fear to remember their inner strength and rights. And it's better to do it together in an organized way. We want to give the floor to our good friend Dr. Gaston Kanouly-Bet, USA.
Dear brothers and sisters of the East, my name is Gaston Kanouly-Bet. I'm an Argentinian medical doctor from the United States of America, and I am an author and an activist. And I am honored to be addressing you today. In most dire circumstances, we find ourselves today. Humanity is in crisis. Crisis is a medical term coined by Hippocrates to describe the point of inflection in a patient's progress, where the disease does not play out any further, and the patient either dies or heals. Humanity is today at this point of crisis. All has come out in the open. Nothing is hidden anymore. Rampant genocide, rampant senseless wars with the real and imminent threat of nuclear holocaust, rampant corruption, pedophilia, and sexual perversions in the ruling classes, manufactured economic collapse, manufactured key population displacements with famine, misery, and war, manufactured migrations to dilute other key populations, manufactured diseases and pandemics with cures proclaimed as floating lifesavers, but made of lead, manufactured climate doom as excuse for geoengineering with real disastrous consequences for the planet and all its inhabitants. Manufactured political platforms based on grotesque lies to win manufactured elections so that all these impositions take on an illusory mantle of legitimacy. Manufactured science to justify manufactured narratives about reality. Manufactured belief systems that claim to want to save our souls while keeping us disempowered and dependent on their hierarchies. A digital prison that is taking over the collective thinking, molding the perception of reality in such a way that leads to progressive and utter disconnection from the real, to isolation of the individual, to complete vulnerability and dependence. A digital prison controlling finances to the point where our life earnings become a number on a screen, so very easy to erase. All these are just a few of the most blatant geopolitical movements unfolding today, uniformly all over the planet, furthering the control, exploitation, and extermination for thinning out of the human herd. Behind all these, we clearly see today a dark, satanic hand above nations and peoples that with total impunity pushes on the human collective all this and more. This plan, this course of action for humanity has long been in execution. Slowly and pervasively, it has been infiltrating the whole planet and rotting us all. This plan has been exquisitely laid out and executed with many layers of contingencies, showing in its unfolding a high intelligence. This plan progresses and will likely continue to progress more. There is still more to come. But this masterfully evil plan has one fatal flaw, one Achilles heel, which can make it crumble and bring it to a halt. We are gathered today to figure out what to do with all this. We are gathered today to acknowledge the crisis we're in. We are gathered today, consequently, to name the disease, and in doing so, start moving the point of inflection towards healing. If we are here to name and list all the wrongdoings that is being done, this does not help anymore. We all know this already. This is not the disease. These are its consequences. And those that deny it today are purposefully choosing to be blind and deaf. If we are here to point fingers and name and list all those that are doing wrong, this does not help anymore. We all know this already. This is not the disease. These are only opportunistic parasites taking advantage of the disease conditions. And those that deny it today are purposefully choosing to be blind and deaf. Let me ask a fundamental question here. For all those opportunistic parasites executing this master plan, what is their source of power? The answer is obvious. We are their source of power. Each one of us is. And here is the fundamental detail for our consideration that is not commonly mentioned and much less discussed in depth. Each one of us in our quotidianity, in the seemingly small actions of our everyday life. Every time we allow convenience to rule over what corresponds, we give them power. In our everyday life, every time we choose to do what benefits us individually, with no consideration of how it impacts on others, we give them power. In our everyday life, every time we choose to look the other way when wrongdoing is unfolding in front of our eyes, because of indifference or fear, we give them power. Every time in our simple daily lives, the guiding principles we are all very capable of, such as apathy, cowardice, maliciousness, or selfishness, rule our actions because we have found justification in the little stories we tell ourselves about reality based on our masks, our personas, or false identities. Oh, I'm a Christian. Oh, I'm a Jew. Oh, I'm a Russian. Oh, I'm an American. Or whatever superficial fiction we attach ourselves to. And through this attachment, we dismiss the real. We give them power. But if you see it this way, you're working on an assumption, and your assumption is wrong. Herein lies the fatal flaw for this evil master plan. Their whole plan for humanity's enslavement pivots around the fact that you will continue working on this flawed assumption, that humans will remain with dull hearts, with eyes that don't want to see and with ears that don't want to hear in their everyday lives. They count on the fact that humans will remain oblivious to their quotidianity being what builds the system. They count on the fact that humans will continue thinking that all these must be fixed through the political being done better, through the economical being done better, through better science, or even through better and more truthful addition to some practiced religion. They count with the fact that we remain totally convinced about doing the same thing over and over and expecting that a different outcome will someday miraculously happen, when this is the very definition of insanity. They count on us continuing to try to fix the problem with the same frame of mind which created the problem in the first place. Humanity as a collective has been acting to this point as sophisticated apes. The collective is built through the sum of the actions and inactions of the individuals that conform it. And if each one of us does not acknowledge and embrace these, and conversely, assume that this may be true for those around me, but not me, I am doing quite well, thank you very much. If we have no humbleness and refuse revising all our assumptions about life to this point, then we're part of the problem. Because to this point, and most likely, we have all been conditioned to stay in these low states of selfishness, interaction, some more than others. Many will display at one point or another some solidarity, altruism, compassion, sympathy, caring. We all are capable of these. But in general terms, we still remain under the banner of every man for himself. The systematic indoctrination of isolation, competition, superficiality, banality, vanity, false identities, added to the sustained illusions of conflict, fear, and scarcity, and our acceptance and embracing of this indoctrination, our acceptance, this has been the plan. These are the traits in our behavior that allow the emergence of the social chaos we see today. This is exactly the disease that these opportunistic parasites feed from and fuel along. This is the master plan. And the fatal flaw in their plan is the assumption on their part that this is our fixed and unmovable nature, and that this will not change. But this is not our nature. This has been, to this point, our choice. Consequently, we can choose differently. I am sorry that having been away from you, I do not know what your actions are. From this unknowing, I humbly speak in general terms, based on what I have seen in activism around the world. What I say may or may not apply individually to you. My humble suggestion is that each one of us takes in the assumption that what is being said here applies to me until proven otherwise. This conviction to be proactively revising my assumptions about life is the drive that allows me to change myself, so that in changing myself, I change the world. Stop acting on the stage of the unreal world of appearance and start acting in the real world of everyday action. Again, change yourself to change the world. The meaningful revolution that will change everything must play out within each one of us. This revolution will spread and bring by itself the new era we are so desperately wanting. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Gaston. We will be joined by a blogger and activist from Kyrgyzstan, Alexander Kensin, who will tell us about the importance of studying our rights and freedoms.
How people can resist or counteract illegal actions by the system. When people's rights and freedoms are taken away completely, which is unacceptable. I think that the Mahatma Gandhi system, Satyagraha, is very suitable. Nonviolent resistance or ignoring illegal laws, decrees, and actions by the system. And here's the basic logic. It's not against, but through. That is, strong people don't fight the system. They understand the rules of the game, use laws, act through procedures, and create publicity. In other words, people should become public, declare that they don't like something, or that their rights and freedoms are being violated. Instead of being afraid or hiding, they should express themselves through social media. This is a public medium. If, for example, chaos breaks out in City N, and at least half or even a third of the citizens start filming what is happening on their social media accounts, posting it, and sharing it, then the officials who are causing this chaos will simply be unable to continue doing so. Because their lawlessness is highlighted, and thus they cannot continue such illegal actions. Then here it is, people understand the rules of the game. You must agree, when we play some games, poker, preference, some board games or computer games, people learn the rules. When people live in society, in Russia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, America, Europe, most people do not study the rules of the game. The basic rule is the constitution of the country in which you live. The constitution, the civil code, and the criminal code are all things that need to be studied. Most people don't study them, don't understand them, and don't want to understand them. That's why this point is important. The basic logic is not against, but through. Strong people don't fight within the system. They understand the rules. That is, they understand the rules. They use the laws. This principle stems from the fact that if you understand the rules, you already start using these laws. And you can only use the laws when you understand them, understand the logic of the laws, understand how to apply them. That is, you need to take the time and study the legislation a little. I can tell you that if you live in any country, it is important to study the basic law, the constitution of the country you live in, the civil code. Because all interactions between citizens, let's not call them citizens now, but individuals and so on, are governed by this code. In other words, this civil code provides a framework for the interaction between citizens, government agencies, and various officials. This is what we need to understand: the Constitution, the Civil Code, the Criminal Code, and how the security forces, police, and militia operate in your country. We need to know how government agencies, officials, and the government apparatus function, as well as how laws are passed. So, in order to understand that this law, for example, is illegal, we need to understand that laws are effects, and for 3 days, as far as I remember. We have the right to protest this law, and people. Imagine if a third of the people protested. The government would post on social media that they are against, for example, the destruction of dogs or the registry of vaccinated animals, or the registry of pets, on a large scale. Imagine, and people put it on social networks. How do you think the authorities of men react to this? Well, there is such a concept that in Roman law, if a Klaibish begins to sing about some problem, well, to sing about it, to talk about it, to say that against, then the authorities of men must listen to it. That is, inevitably, according to the legislation, the authorities of men must listen to it. There is such a concept that they won't listen to us. But the fact is that no matter how much the system is in disarray, there are certain rules in place. The system is designed to operate according to specific patterns. If the bureaucratic apparatus itself begins to violate these patterns, the system collapses. There are always certain observers in the system who make sure that these rules are followed, and the small officials who start doing something are simply removed or purged. As it is correctly said, this is because they are disrupting the integrity of the system, which is dangerous. In other words, there must be a balance between the managed, the manager, the middle management, and the top management. Everything must work properly. This is what makes the system work. Farther, human rights laws. That's what I tell people all the time. This is to study public international law, the very first one, and, probably, the main thing. Next, I assure you, I started studying international law. Then it becomes like a hobby. That's interesting. You're watching, and you're getting more and more interested. It's like someone watching, say, football or a comedy club. And you're wondering what new legislation is, what else is in international law. And you start studying. And the first thing I would recommend is a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is the first one. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as they say, is advisory in nature. But there are also tricks and traps in there. How to apply these principles to yourself. The 30 points of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And then there is the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. These are the 3 documents that you need to know. Well, at least to know the structure, to understand what article you can rely on. In principle, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the base or body, yes, such a skeleton of the Constitution. Any constitution, in principle, it is based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Publicity. The system is not afraid of you. The system is afraid of publicity. What I said earlier. Publicity. Don't be afraid to officially declare your rights. Don't be afraid to say it officially, like I did when I expressed my will that I don't cooperate with the private commercial company of the WHO. I don't support medical experiments. All the vaccinations, experiments, and restrictions don't concern me. I expressed my will on my social media platforms, so it doesn't affect me. I don't interact with them. Don't be afraid to express your will in this way. Your relatives and friends may say you're a fool or a sectarian. I haven't. Most people think I'm a fool. But when people were being grabbed for so-called meat in the DPR Donetsk People's Republic, I should say, we helped out there. The mates helped with documentation, helped people defend themselves. And for my family, I'm a fool, a simpleton, and an incomprehensible sectarian. But the people I helped are still my friends. Then we continue with publicity. I repeat, publicity. The system is not afraid of you, but it is afraid of publicity, tools, social media, the media, and collective appeals. In other words, use your social media, use the media, newspapers, newspaper appeals, TV channels, and collective appeals. Just get together as a team, go to the authorities, and complain. For example, if you're being pressured by the system and you're thinking, how can I resist the system when it's so powerful? But there's an executive, let's say a manager at the Housing and Utilities Department, who's harassing the residents of building number 5. So, you gather with the residents and start harassing this manager. Write complaints, find out who's above him, and see who's in charge of this manager. Here is the supervisory authority, which there, write an appeal about his violations, complaints about him, for more strict, to the police, to the prosecutor's office. Imagine, here is a house, let 100 people live in it, roughly speaking. 100 complaints come to this official. No matter how much he is covered, what kind of traction and connections he does not have. He will say, listen, dear, what have you done there? What is it? What are you doing? You are messing around. You are putting us in the slammer. We will be slapped. That is, believe me, you can say, no, it doesn't work, back and forth. But they will tell you anyway, because the system is afraid of publicity. That's the point. Fourth, it's about bringing people together. One person is weak, but a group is already powerful. That's what I always say, that you should work with your surroundings, your family, and your friends. If your relatives don't understand, look for friends who understand the essence of the system, who understand at least the basics of human rights protection, who are interested in people's rights and freedoms, and who at least study the law, even at an elementary level. including the Constitution, Civil Code, Criminal Code, and international law. You should also take people like this, and there should be a certain association. This is already a force. Imagine that even if you have 10 people like this, they come to terrorize you, but you're all well versed. They are very afraid of the system, and they are afraid of human rights activists because they can mess with anyone's head. The police officer, the commandant, and the prosecutor. As they say, there's a saying that arguing with a lawyer is like trying to burn fire, drown water, catch the wind, and so on. Therefore, educate yourself and come together. Create initiative groups, chat rooms, and social associations. Public associations, inside them you make chats, where you learn, communicate, support, local, around the world, and so on. Nonviolent pressure, satyagraha, back from what I started, Mahatma Gandhi. Methods of ignoring unfair demands. Remember what happened when cows in Siberia began to destroy, take away from people? Well, create lawlessness. It's just lawlessness. In America, if you walked into a private yard, those pharmacists, those veterinarians, they would have been shot. Just shot in the head with a shotgun and taken out. And that's it. If you walked into my private property, you're out of here. I'll shoot you and send you to the dump. We're in complete chaos. And it turns out that people have started ignoring this murder, ignoring it. And it worked. Many people say it doesn't work. It does work. They've seen the power of people coming together, people ignoring. They've suffered losses anyway. Next, the refusal to participate. Teachers and doctors, individuals, as I call them because they are weak-willed, they say, but we can't, we were forced, we can't do anything else. I say, how can you not do this? So they'll tell you to shoot students or vaccinate them, and you'll do it, right? They can't, we can't, I'm a doctor. And what? Especially if you're a doctor or a teacher, you shouldn't participate in these criminal activities. Refusing to participate in criminal activities, boycotting. Well, there was a good demonstration about the world making. Peaceful protests. Well, peaceful protests have been banned in many corporate countries. Organize peaceful protests and flash mobs on social media to spread the information. If they block social networks, so send out SMS messages to spread the information. And it's important to stay within the law. There's a specific law, so don't break it. Don't make any revolutions, so people don't get killed, as it's not necessary. That's my brief presentation on sadiography, nonviolent resistance, and how people can counteract everything. And most importantly, create your own system. A system of a new, healthy, and conscious society. For real people, for people who live on Earth. Not individuals, not any legal entities. A new world. Without moneylenders, without loans, without installments, without any kind of bondage, without any kind of interest rates, or anything else. In short, without all of it. A conscious world.
Thank you, Alexander. We invite the Yellow Vest movement from Belgium with their proposal for democracy and their refusal to fight anyone.
Voilà, donc une petite intervention pour Union for Free People.
Statement of the Belgian Yellow Vests for the Union of Free People. We do not pledge allegiance to anyone and remain a civil movement that dares to think openly and freely. We readily support everything that aligns with this spirit of freedom of thought. You can vehemently protest against the countless despicable acts that the supreme oppressors and abusers commit against us through successive laws, each of which is identical in its purest and most brutal form of abuse, under the guise of austerity policies. But as long as you only react to their discrimination, you will remain in a position of voluntary submission and obedience. This paragraph already says a lot. Therefore, simply condemning a certain scoundrel will not be enough. From economic crises to financial scandals, from political crises to social scandals, from environmental crises to betrayal at the expense of the people, from ideological crises to numerous betrayals of the ideal itself, a significant portion of the population suffers from various degrees of stigmatization, invisibility, discrimination, or simply oblivion, even isolation. How can one not be sensitive to this suicide process that stems from a cynical self-isolation that convinces some to be lazy, others to be unable to adapt, and in the middle to be deeply dependent on a system that lacks vision, solutions, and is riddled with endemic corruption and pathological deafness that borders on outright sociopathy. To restore dialogue not only with the working class, the middle class, and the entrepreneur, but also with the outcasts, the exiled, the marginalized, the enslaved, the dissidents, the poor, the toothless. The homosexuals are reference to the Kalauch Manifesto, those who are considered extremists, populists, those who are accused of conspiracy theories, and those who are labeled as conspiracy theorists. On November 16th, 8 years ago, for the first time in the history of intersections, roundabouts were finally useful to allow Walter, who voted for the far right, and Rashid, who leaned towards the far left, to openly discuss their frustrations, suffering, and anger, looking each other in the eye, with tears of the same taste and blood of the same red color, like the scratches from carrying the pallets used to light the lighthouse at night. All the labels disappeared in an instant. People talked about their daily lives, and everyone shed the same salty tears, realizing that the scratches were healing with the same red blood. For a magical moment, people came together. They talked and sometimes argued, but in doing so, they momentarily overcame their differences and became a people of all kinds. First basic principle: we will not impose right or left. This does not mean to renounce belonging to a party, but rather to overcome divisions. We have chosen benevolent neutrality for the common good, to maintain an open dialogue between all. The movement has declared itself non-partisan, not accountable to anyone, and especially not to the political world. Second main principle: the absence of a leader. Frustrated by the betrayal of pseudo-elites who only perpetuate themselves without solving any of the crises they use to present themselves as saviors, the yellow vests reject leadership. Every citizen deserves another citizen. Third main principle: I'm tired of experts. You are the experts of your own life. When the wallet is empty, the refrigerator, the oil tank, the disconnected electricity meter, the water leak, the little girl's school bag for the start of the school year, the money to pay for the education of an older child who wanted to go to university, but had to work at McDonald's or Uber to pay for student housing, or, even worse, some resorted to prostitution, and you're left to fend for yourself in these situations. Well, you are the experts of your own life. You are collectively and democratically capable of deciding what is good for you and what is not. Common sense. Fourth fundamental principle: direct democracy at all levels, within the strict framework of human rights. Stop the smokescreens, stop pitting everyone against each other. Democracy is the goal. Let's achieve it. Let's strive for harmony, and it will be contagious. Referendum on civil initiative is a mandatory system of referendums, not just an advisory one. It will have the force of law. It will be used for the development of a new constitution through a constituent process confirmed by this mandatory referendum. The transition to a system of civil chambers, where citizens will be selected by lot, and sociological quotas proportional to their social class. This chamber will become a legislative body where proposals will be discussed by committees that have prepared real efforts to restore popular sovereignty. The implementation or rejection of decisions by the legislative chamber will always be subject to approval by the entire population through a referendum. Civil society, on the other hand, can act as an alternative to the representative system to prevent corruption, lobbying, and, above all, career-driven politics. All controversial issues will be automatically put to a referendum on recall, repeal of a law or mandate. Based on a petition, the people can initiate a referendum at any time, allowing them to recall a member of parliament appointed to a mandate, repeal a law or decision that disregards the public good, or to pass a law or make a decision in favor of the public good. Legislative referendum. A short-term, binding and revocable mandate ensures the end of nepotism and political dynasties, makes political parties obsolete, and guarantees the elimination of the influence of lobbyists and corruption. transparency of public accounts and public affairs, directly and online. Moreover, we must fight against the impending techno-fascism, which is spreading and plundering, and the war that inevitably results from it. Who wants war? No one. No mother or father wants to see their son kill or die. Therefore, no one is interested in war. And yet, it is everywhere and constant. This means that the decisions about wars are not made by these ordinary people that I have just mentioned. Of course, this is all just talk, but we have already crossed the line of empty words. Actions, the opposition to the people, that is, those in power, are putting forward completely disastrous proposals. I am now talking about the example of Germany. A law has just been revived and strengthened, according to which no German man can travel abroad for more than 3 months without the permission of the Ministry of War, which is more prosaically called the Ministry of Defense. Just imagine. This means that they consider men to be subject to military conscription in the event of a war, which is decided by no one in particular, and this is simply the end of freedom of movement, freedom of travel, and therefore conscription, regardless of our opinion. So, let's imagine that we would vote for someone we don't know, who would form a coalition with someone we don't know, and these people would decide to start a war against Luxembourg, Russia, Togo, or some Pierre, Paul, or Jacques, and we would foolishly go out and get killed. Seriously, it's absurd. What person on earth could possibly approve of this, knowing the history, the shame, the foolishness, and the horror of the situation? No, we disagree. Enough is enough. So, the citizens of the world, forgive me for being pretentious, who are gathered here in my words at this very moment, are saying, enough, go to hell, no, let's do this without us. The citizens of the world refuse to go to war, fight in it, or suffer from it. Therefore, I do not know who made this decision in Germany, but I would like to know their names, as moral condemnation and shame will befall them for thousands of years. We must publish the names of those who have dared to say such things, who are beginning to consider war as a possibility, even though we all know that it is a monster, something that should never be allowed to cross the line. So, to be more precise, these people have decided that every individual must now submit their freedom of movement to the whims of the Ministry of War. Is this a joke? It's 2026 in Germany. Therefore, the answer is no. Demonstrations are already taking place. It's a modest beginning, but it's crucial for fathers, and I speak on behalf of my category, but also for mothers and everyone else, to strongly oppose this. It's very, very important. Realize this. We used to say, yes, but as long as I'm doing well, I can go to McDonald's, the movies, I have a job, a wife, I don't care, I'm fine. There's death all over the place, and we don't care. Well, listen, those of you who do care, this is happening to you right now. People are suffering, and so are you. So if you've been standing on the sidelines, thinking, yes, let's see, as long as it's other people, I don't care, but now it's not like that. Now you can take action. Nothing and no one will save you from the sea surrounding you, except for yourself. The time to say the activists will do their job is over. Now, if each of you doesn't do anything, we're in serious trouble. So, to be specific, Germany has just enacted this law. It existed, but for a long time, it remained more theoretical than practical. Now, it's concrete and on everyone's mind. No German male citizen can leave the country for longer than the Ministry of War deems necessary. This is the first concrete step towards mobilization, if anyone decides to start it. It's crucial to act now, because the more time passes, the harder it becomes to fight. When you're in a totalitarian regime, you have to fight. It is now, when they are modestly trying to carry this out, pretending to be cunning, that we must react. This is a call to all Germans, all Europeans, and the whole world to react now. They are establishing authoritarian systems that led to dictatorship everywhere, for everyone, including you who are listening to me now. You must definitely react to this. This is a call to action. The peoples of the world reject war, they do not want war. Otherwise, we condemn ourselves to be the worst of people if we decide the opposite. Naturally, you have neither our consent nor our support. And in fact, you are the worst people possible. People who promote war, knowing that it is nothing but theft, robbery, rape, murder, and dishonor. It is the most terrible thing that can exist. So you, the people who walk around saying, yes, war, 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 you are fools and idiots. You do not represent humanity. Humanity is the complete opposite of you. You are few, you are very few, and you are incredibly mediocre and corrupt. And we do not consider ourselves to be your subjects. We don't consider ourselves to be the ones who will follow your decisions. That's all. No one wants war, we don't want it, and we won't fight it. That's all. This is not a request, it's a prediction, it's an order that I am giving you. The people won't go to war, understand? Is it clear? And if it's not clear, we will come and tell you more precisely, right in your ear. We will whisper it in your ear. But be careful, because when the people rise up because of these moments, beware. You won't be able to hide behind any tree. Look at Gaddafi. The list of such cases is long, so be very careful. Louis XVI, the 1,000-year absolutism of the great kings. You've seen how he ended, haven't you? Study this history carefully. Don't send our children to war, you scoundrels. Don't send our children to war. Understand?
Thank you to the Yellow Vest for their speech. In Russia, for several years now, people have been organizing themselves from the bottom up into thematic committees and local councils of citizens to protect their rights and build true democracy. We believe that this is an example that really works, helps to spread the word quickly and brings people together on common interests. This is also supported by the inspiring example of the people's leader, Svetlana Ladarus, who has demonstrated in practice that we should not be afraid of officials, but rather respect our human dignity and revive our inner spirit. And her scientific practical method is just the solid foundation of the association, which helps to cope with fears, selfishness, apathy, psychological and psychotronic pressure from the authorities, and quickly resolve conflicts in the team while maintaining a strong friendship. About democracy in Russia, Svetlana Ladarus and her persecution will tell Ekaterina Sizova, civil activist from Russia.
Hello dear participants of the international conference I Want to Live. My name is Ekaterina, so Catherine in English, and I am a civil activist from Russia, and I'd like to share with you our experience of uniting and protecting human rights. One of the catalysts for popular protests in Russia, same with many other countries around the world, was the pandemic declared in 2020. It led to numerous violations of citizens' rights and freedoms, you know. In Russia, this problem was really acute. To force people to comply with the new rules, the government created huge amount of propaganda, distorted information, and imposed strict restrictive measures. In our country, the public, the activists, called the COVID-19 pandemic a global political conspiracy, aiming to reduce the population and establish total control over society. And by activists, a number of concrete actions were proposed. For example, on June 1st, 2021, the No to Coercion movement was founded and immediately spread across the country. People across all regions began joining en masse, as many faced intense pressure and violations on their rights. Highly effective forms of refusal to coerce vaccination were developed and spread like wildfire across the country, helping countless people resist illegal coercion and defend their rights. The illegal initiative of politicians to assign QR codes to citizens also caused mass protests. This initiative, degrading human dignity, turned to be truly the last straw. Activists across the country collected a huge number of signatures demanding to stop QR codes imposition. As a result, the authorities had to abandon the QR codes. It's important to note that this popular resistance didn't arise out of nowhere. At that point, efforts to unite local councils were already underway in Russia. Back in June 2019, public activists held the first Congress of People's Representatives. It was the first such large-scale event in 30 years of social apathy and became the impetus for the citizen action across the country. Our human history is filled with examples of people uniting to save themselves around a vibrant, selfless figure, a national hero, a leader. First and foremost, everyone thinks of the Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi. And so it happened in Russia. We have our own Mahatma Gandhi. And there is a woman, Svetlana Lada Rus. Her ideas for uniting the people and reviving true democracy have become a guiding light for countless activists across the country. Lada Rus is a strong and courageous woman who has dedicated her life to establishing social justice and protecting the rights of Russian people. Svetlana Lada Rus is a person of immense charisma and an encyclopedic mind. She is a public figure. She founded a huge all-Russian public organization, and she is a scientist, a psychologist, a lawyer, a writer, and a member of the Union of Russian Writers, a video director, and a creative individual, a poet and composer. And most importantly, Svetlana Lada Rus is a whistleblower, so a real truth teller. She has exposed over 80 facts proving anti-human actions and intentions of acting power. And the whole world knows the names of modern day heroes as Snowden, Assange, John Coleman, and now Mohammad Safa, who could not remain silent and risked their well-being, exposed the lies and plots to destroy the world. And in Russia, such a person is our people's leader, Svetlana Lada Rus. She has also repeatedly risked her well-being and life for the sake of the people and their future. To say the least, she was the first to demand investigation into Putin's activities, considering obvious facts of illegal seizure and retention of power, sabotage and high treason in his actions. Lada Rus also issued a statement about secret change of state system in Russia, from democracy to authoritarianism, totalitarianism. Yes. For years, she has been exposing the main fraud that Russia has been secretly turned into a colony, and those in power represent the interests but of globalists and Chabad sect, and not the interests of people of Russia. Svetlana Lada Rus achieved the impossible. She established the non-Kremlin People's Party Volia, so the will. It brought together ordinary people to defend Russia from destruction. But in 2016, in the midst of the parliament elections, the party was illegally and brazenly liquidated by Russian Supreme Court on false charges of extremism, completely illegally, having violated the right to defend itself. The real reason for the liquidation was the party's participation in the parliament elections, with a list of 278 people, posing a real challenge to the ruling Kremlin party named United Russia. So Lada Rus repeatedly ran for elections at the various levels, including presidential elections. In 2012, she ran for president and had nearly 300,000 signatures in her support. That was a true indicator of Lada Rus's popularity in Russia. But Lada Rus was not allowed to participate in the next elections, and her political persecution began. The system pulled out all the stops to isolate Ladurus from society, thereby depriving the people of true leader. Authorities have not dared to directly prosecute her for her statements and political activities because Ladurus and her allies operated bravely, legally, and too clearly. Instead, a scheme was devised to get rid of the unwanted debunker by fabricated a criminal case on an obviously bogus pretext based on false accusations. So this method of eliminating undesirables has long been tried and tested in other countries. Well known are the names of such political figures as Marine Le Pen in France and Eugenia Gutzul in Moldova. When a political competitor to the ruling system genuinely advocates for the interests of the common people and refuses to play by the system's rules, they are hunted down. And because the system understands that if the people have a leader, they will want to exercise their right to participate in the governance of state affairs, and then power can pass to the people. Therefore, the leader is vilified and persecuted by all means, a typical way to turn the people away from their leader. Similar actions were taken against Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. But the people did not believe the government's smear campaign and followed their leaders to the end. And so both Black Americans and Indians achieved freedom. Therefore, it is the people who can and must stand up for their leader. I know there are movements that claim that people don't need leaders, that it's every man for himself. But a people without a leader is like a train without a locomotive. They are disunited, lacking of common goal and driving force, and will be unable to resist the globalist system that has now enslaved all countries. This system is well organized and has its own hierarchy and its own leaders. Therefore, we, ordinary people, in order to defend our right to life, must also unite, put forward our own genuine, honest people's leaders, and only then we will be able to win and to get freedom. In Russia, the people are increasingly uniting around Svetlana Ladurus, and the more the system is eager to destroy her, the more ordinary people are rising to her defense. Because we understand that only united people with a single idea and led by a people's leader, not a figurehead, can build a just society. And now Ladurus's ideas for establishing the people's power are more relevant than ever. She has offered a very simple mechanism for the country's recovery from the crisis. The first is uniting people on territorial basis. For example, residents of a single district or village facing similar problems form a council to address these pressing issues. For example, organizing transportation for school children, ensuring local road reparation, eliminating an illegal landfill, protecting a forest from logging, and so on. A residents' council can achieve all these things. Only civic engagement brings results. Nothing good can be expected from the government system without active involvement of organized citizens in the life of their country. We saw this vividly in the spring of 2024 when catastrophic floods swept across Russia. The tragedy happened largely due to officials' failure to fulfill their direct responsibilities. They failed to take adequate flood prevention measures. Only when the people had them accountable and demanded to report, to provide and fulfill the flood water prevention plan, only then the authorities began to act. We've long understood that officials don't care about people, are not interested in solving people's problems, and the only way to protect our rights is through genuine public unification. For example, distant learning didn't last long in precisely those areas where parent councils were really active and strongly opposed to this form of education. The plan to enslave people with injections, masks, and QR codes essentially failed only thanks to the active and informed protests of councils across the country. Activists filed complaints with the prosecutor's office, filed lawsuits against gubernatorial decrees, and conducted active educational work. All these active efforts have brought results. Svetlana Lada-Rus has always encouraged people to engage in this kind of civic engagement, and it produces good results. That's the first point. The second point, a united, organized people can peacefully and legally express their will of no confidence in the current system of government. And the third point, open popular elections at all levels with the participation of truly trustworthy people and the establishment of a people system of government accountable to the people. This is a peaceful and legal path to restoring the rights of the people. I believe this is the only true path, not only for our people, but for the entire world, for the people to assert their right to life, freedom, prosperity, a clean environment, the resources of their country, freedom of speech and expression, and the right to elect their representatives. But the real people's power can only be built with a leader who is of the people and for the people. Look, the entire world stands on the brink of an abyss. The plot to destroy the world, known as the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse, is well known and was openly demonstrated at the opening of the French Olympics, when the horseman Death rode under the Seine and then led all the countries with him. And then a nuclear explosion and the scorched earth that followed were also staged there. So, is this where the current elites are leading the world? Total control, complete deprivation of the people of their legal rights against the backdrop of a looming Third World War. That's what the current system of governance has led the world to. And our people understand this and refuse to be in slavery and poverty in our own country. So the time has come for the people themselves, in order to survive, to take control of their countries into their own hands. And to do this, it is absolutely essential to identify a people's leader and rally around him. Russia has such a leader. Russia is not Putin. It's safe to say that the real Russia is Lada-Rus. She is persecuted by the system, but the people stand behind her. This is the true popular opposition in our country, which is carefully silenced. And that's why you don't know that Russia. The official media won't tell you about it. They lie. They portray us as aggressors, and they don't tell you that there is no popular support behind the political decisions of the country's current leadership. The people recognize Svetlana Lada-Rus as their leader, not the Chabad Jew Putin. You must know that Putin won't save the world from the globalists. He's just a puppet in their hands. There is a real popular liberation movement in Russia, the Lada Rus Union. It expresses the interests of the common people to live justly and happily in our own land. And please spread the word about Lada Rus, the true leader of Russia. This is the truth everyone needs to know. By doing so, you will greatly help both the world and yourself. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks to Ekaterina for this bright speech, and we'll give the floor to Svetlana Ladarus herself, PhD in psychology, the most persecuted politician in Russia, a people's organized leader, candidate for president of Russia in 2012. Author of more than 80 film exposures, member of the Union of Writers of Russia, author of the method of prevention of social stress disorders, 2 patents of the correction of the state of the human body.
Они всеми силами рвутся к уничтожению мира. Вот, наконец, глубоко вникните, вас хотят уничтожить. И все остальные события, все это идет в русле, вот именно, и речи все, да, в русле того, чтобы вы согласились, промолчали. И очень правильно сделал Мохаммед Сафа, который присутствовал на совещании, где Трамп разрабатывал ядерную войну. Он все это обнародовал, ему терять нечего. Если он не обнародовал бы, была бы ядерная война, и он бы погиб вместе со всеми. Так что он спасает и себя, и вас. А все молчат. Также Джон Коллиман писал книгу «Комитет 300», найдите, прочитайте. Там все фамилии, фирмы, все планы. Он все бумаги секретных архивов обнародовал всему миру, и поэтому в него стреляли, в его жену. Но, слава богу, они живы. А почему их не убили? А потому что книгу просто затерли и не дали этой книге проникнуть в умы и в сознание человечества. То есть планы, как были в этой книге изложены, никого не потрясли, так они сейчас исполняются и приходят к концу. Очень хотят, чтобы махнули рукой на ядерную войну. Но правильно говорит Мохаммед Сафа, надо выразить несогласие. Только открыв рот мы сможем защитить свою жизнь. Да? Напоминаю, что именно закрытый рот, молчание, со страха ли, от непонимания ли, но молчание, да, пропустить, промолчать. Это главная задача Хабада. Если вы будете сопротивляться, он не сможет вас убить. Это ядерная война надвигается. Болтовня Трампа сегодня одно, завтра другое. Даже не стоит вообще анализа, что он там говорит. Потому что видно, что он и загнан в угол, опозорен, и ему это очень больно. А ущемленный, горделивый человек, он опасен. Он нажмет на что хотите. Поэтому только наша воля, а это психическая энергия, встанет против вот этой жестокой силы, которая хочет сожрать. Вот этот Мохаммед Сафа понимает, что и он в ядерной войне погибнет. Поэтому он сказал, я поступил со своим креслом, своим местом, я ушел в отставку, но я имею право вам это объявить. Точно так же Сноуден ушел в подполье, но он объявил. Кольман рисковал жизнью, но он объявил. Для вас, граждане. А мы сидим и боимся тронуться. Меня объявили иноагентом, когда я самый любящий родину человек, и которая жизнь положила на то, чтобы именно родину и народ освободить. А я враг народа объявленный, а вы молчите. Даже петиция не подписана всеми. Ребята, куда мы идем? К ядерной войне, к закрытому рту. Подумайте об этом. И очень хотелось бы, чтобы судьбу мы взяли в свои руки, а не играли нами вот такие Трампы. Давайте все-таки все станем вот этими Мохаммедами Сафа, Джонами Коллиманами, Сноуденами, Ассанжами и начнем говорить правду. Только тогда мир будет спасен.
It is very important to understand that brave and honest people who give us examples and methods of escaping slavery need to be protected and supported. They are being eliminated because they understand that they can unite the people and describe their plans. Therefore, it is important for us to replicate the brave actions of the leaders and stand up for them, which means making their persecution public and talking about their experience and activities, whether they are leaders in your country or in other countries. After all, we don't know which country will initiate drastic changes and set an example for others. The Gaza Strip was destroyed. Look for such individuals around the world. According to the UN, almost now it's time to summarize our conference died there. Millions starved without humanitarian aid, which was blocked and prevented by IDF soldiers. A French woman who visited this site said, "In Gaza, we found a single mass grave with 300 people in it. Small children were killed with their hands tied behind their backs. This is a cold-blooded planned execution. This is a diagnosis of system that has lost any reference points of humanity. Genocide has become a routine for them." Trump calls himself a peacemaker, while in fact he can be compared with Hitler because he behaves as a bandit, unleashing wars and brazenly invading countries. He kidnapped the president of Venezuela, threatened the seas, Greenland and Cuba, started a war against Iran. American strike on elementary school in Iran had no military or strategic purpose. Scott Ritter, former Marine intelligence officer, said 170 Iranian girls were deliberately killed by an American Tomahawk missile with Semel-Beric charge, all the dead burned to the ground. Senseless, brazen, unpunished murder followed by Trump's openly calling the people of Iran animals. The blockade of the Strait of Hormuz leads to rising energy, fuel and fertilizers prices. According to the forecast of the UN World Food Programme, the situation is threatening to starve 45 million. The war in Ukraine has been going on longer than the Great Patriotic War lasted for the USSR. Official data of losses are not reported to the peoples of both Russia and Ukraine. According to unofficial data, more than 3 million people died on both sides. According to the UN, 10 million Ukrainians have been forced to flee their homes. The Third World War is actually already underway, and the UN is already discussing the possibility to use nuclear weapons. UN diplomat Mohammed Safar said, "I don't think people understand the gravity of the situation, as the UN is preparing for possible nuclear weapon use in Iran. I gave up my diplomatic career to leak this information. The possibility of the use of nuclear weapon must be taken very seriously. Act now, spread the message worldwide. Take the streets, protest for our humanity and future. Only people can stop it." Israel has nuclear weapons, and it is taking part in the operation against Iran along with the United States. The threat of nuclear strike is also possible in a war between Ukraine and Russia. Russian intelligence received information that London and Paris want to secretly transfer components for nuclear weapons creation to Ukraine and present everything as a Ukrainian development. We see that the rulers of our countries have brought us to this deadly situation. We believe that they are leading us to destruction deliberately. They profess the theory of chosenness of the golden billion, live according to the theory of Thomas Malthus, which says claims that limited natural resources of the planet are not enough for everyone. Only the golden billion is worthy of using them, and the masses of the population are subject to destruction. The attitude of this elite toward us useless eaters was eloquently expressed by John Rockefeller, the founder of the Rockefeller's clan. Money is divine proof of the superior species of people. The master race should not allow ugly poor creatures to multiply. The public acquise of Jeffrey Epstein has shown the true face of these rulers. Satanism and cannibalism. The acquise indicate ritual sacrifices, rape, human trafficking, eating human flesh. UN experts call the actions of Epstein, his accomplices and guests a crime against humanity. Epstein client list includes President Clinton, Trump, Bush, members of the British and other European royal families. In the acquise, there is information that Epstein was Putin's financial manager. That is, the satanic network covers all countries of the world. There is also a force in the world that purposefully wants to destroy our civilization. This is the Chabad Lubavitch sect. Its ideology is worse than that of the Nazis. The Nazis killed millions asserting to the superiority of Aryan race, while Chabad considers only its adepts to divine creatures, and the rest of the peoples, including ordinary Jews, to be goyim, who are vomit and feces for them. And they want to destroy billions for their glory of the god Moshiach, or simply Satan. It was Rabbi of Yemen who openly claimed that for the Jews, God is Satan himself. Chabad Lubavitch has set itself the goal of worldwide expansion, and Chabad Lubavitch members have achieved this goal by appointing their adherents to govern different countries of the world. In a Jewish kippah, when praying in the Western Wall, Macron, Clinton, Obama, Prince William, Jenny Milei, and many others were seen. US President Trump is a Chabad member. He joined Chabad in 2017. Orthodox Jews presented Trump with a silver Torah crown, which makes him an initiate of the highest decree, the Vicar of Moshiach. Zelensky was transferred millions of dollars by Chabad members Kolomoisky, Akhmetov, and Pinchuk. Putin is Jewish on his mother's side, which is recorded in Soviet documents. Aaron Rekefekt Rodko, who calls himself a Mossad agent in Russia, says, "Today Chabad owns Russia. Putin is true Chabadnik." Blogger Arian Meram says that Putin, Zelensky, and Netanyahu are from the same Chabad pioneer squad and act together and in concert. All their struggle allegedly with each other, sanctions, world wars, this is a spectacle, deception, since they fulfill one task. They quarrel the peoples of the world and destroy billions of goyim. The former head of the Krakow Jewish community, Eduard Hodes, who has been studying Chabad for many years, says that the apotheosis of world history for Chabad is the destruction of all life on earth, with the exception of 1 million Jewish soul sparks, who will unite into primordial 600,000 and begin the process of eternal soaring over the desert earth. Chabad Lubavitch members, as a real religious sectarians, want to destroy the world and even sacrifice their own lives in order to ascend and find bliss in the next world. The people of the world do not want wars and hunger. We do not want to fight each other for the glory of the Chabad ideology and under the rule of Satanists who eat human meat. We do not want to die with our mouth closed for the glory of Moshiach Satan. And this is exactly what they want from us. The Chabad book Zohar says, when Moshiach comes, the nations of the world will be wiped off the face of the earth and destroyed, and their death will be with their mouths closed, like the death of an animal that dies without voice or speech. We did not elect these presidents. All elections have been put performances and deceptions, as many of us have already realized. All countries are shaken by the protest of peoples against their anti-popular rulers. Steps to peace and freedom. To create an international committee for peace. Anti-war organizations and initiative groups are acting all over the world. It's time to join forces. Declare a single no to war. Only people themselves can resist the murder of peoples. The oligarchs do not fight, but force the people. On the basis of the committee, we will be able to collect information from all countries and coordinate our efforts. Announce the international action I want to live. We call on the peoples of the countries in which aggressive military training is being carried out to dismiss the managers and establish true democracy. The peoples do not want to fight. They have nothing to divine. Sign the petition. Let's remove Satanists from power. To create international people's control. We invite the population of all countries to organize people's control in all spheres of life, over the steps and decisions of managers. We, the absolute majority, must regain our right to rule in our countries. Organize an international tribunal. It is years that have passed since World War II. A huge number of wars have been unleashed by the upper echelons. Millions of ordinary people have died. This is a crime against the peoples of the world. And now the Third World War, according to the politicians, a nuclear war is being escalated. We did not agree to it. The constitution of any democratic country states that the people are the only source of power. We believe that the time has come to act and to hold a people's trial on the criminals of the world. for organizing the artificial pandemic and forcing people to get vaccinated, for ritual murders, cannibalism, and pedophilia uncovered in the Epstein's case file, for financial slavery, digital money, total control, blocking the internet, for leading the world to famine and global nuclear war. All people of goodwill should participate in the court as people's observers, and then we will all come together not to the end of the world, but to the golden age. No one else can do it for us. We would like to thank all the participants and listeners of our conference. We look forward to continuing our collaboration and working together to build a brighter future for all of us.
Вставай, проклятием заклейменный, весь мир голодных и рабов. Кипит наш разум возмущенный, и в смертный бой вести готов. Весь мир насилия мы разрушим до основания, а затем мы новый мир построим. Кто был ничем, тот станет всем. Это есть наш последний и решительный бой с интернационалом. Воспрянет род людской. Это есть наш последний и решительный бой с интернационалом. Воспрянет род людской.
Не даст нам избавления, ни бог, ни царь и ни герой. Добьемся мы освобождения своей собственной рукой. Банкиры, деньги цифровые хотят нас в рабство завести. Так скажем нет, пока живые, и не дадим нас в гроб свести. Да будут прокляты убийцы народа, да будут прокляты убийцы России, да будет в разуме и сердце свобода, да будут нам даны могучие силы. Лишь мы, работники всемирной великой армии труда,
владеть землей имеем право,
но паразиты никогда. И если гром великий грянет над сворой псов и палачей, для нас все так же солнце станет сиять огнем своих лучей. Это есть
решительный бой с интернационалом воспрянет род людей.